The radio screamed static and dying men. 540 Marines pinned in a valley turned abattoir. Command issued the order: hold position, wait for clearance. Waiting meant coffins. The enemy owned every ridge, every shadow, every breath of air above that kill zone. Protocol demanded patience. But in war, patience is just another word for acceptable loss. One pilot saw what everyone else refused to see, that the rulebook would bury those men alive. Captain Lena Ward wasn't supposed to be there, wasn't trusted, wasn't wanted. A diversity hire in a boys' club that measured worth in decibels and bravado. They'd sidelined her for months, kept her grounded while others flew glory runs. But she'd studied that valley, knew its winds, its angles, its secrets. And when 540 lives hung by a thread, she did something unforgivable. She broke every rule in the book. If you want to see how one pilot turned defiance into salvation, stay with me until the end. Like this video and drop a comment with your city. I want to see how far this story travels. The first bullet punched through Corporal Danny Reeves's canteen at 0847 hours, spraying water across his chest plate like arterial spray. For a split second, his brain registered wet before alive, and then the valley exploded. 73 seconds. That's how long it took for Operation Granite Shield to collapse from textbook execution into a massacre waiting to happen. The valley was called Serpent's Jaw, a 12-kilometer gash through the Kandara Mountains that looked, from satellite imagery, like someone had dragged a knife through stone. Intelligence had marked it minimal threat. The convoy route was supposed to be clear. 3 armored vehicles, 14 support trucks, 540 Marines moving supplies, and personnel to Forward Operating Base Titan. Simple logistics. Routine movement. The first IED took out the lead vehicle at the narrow choke point 3 clicks in. The explosion flipped 8 tons of armored steel like a child's toy, sending a fireball 30 feet into the morning sky. Before the shockwave dissipated, machine gun fire erupted from positions nobody knew existed, gun nests carved into the ridge faces, camouflaged firing ports, coordinated fields of fire that turned the valley floor into a precision kill zone. Staff Sergeant Marcus Cole hit the ground behind a burning Humvee, his radio already screaming with overlapping voices. Contact left! Contact left! RPG! RPG! Man down! Man down! We need... The transmissions dissolved into static and screaming. Cole pressed himself against the wreckage, feeling heat bake through his body armor. 20 feet away, Private Chen was dragging a wounded Marine toward cover, leaving a smear of blood across the sand. A bullet snapped past Cole's helmet, close enough that he felt the air split. "Get in the ditch! Move to the ditch!" Cole's voice cracked, hoarse from smoke and adrenaline. All along the convoy, Marines scattered like insects under a magnifying glass. The textbook called it tactical dispersal. In reality, it was controlled panic. Men diving behind vehicles, scrambling into roadside depressions, anything to escape the geometry of death pouring down from the ridges. Lieutenant Nathan Cross crouched behind an overturned supply truck, his tactical display showing what everyone already knew. They were completely exposed. Red enemy position markers dotted the high ground like measles. 12 confirmed gun positions, probably more hidden. The Marines were trapped in a shooting gallery with nowhere to go. "Falcon Ridge actual, this is Granite Shield," Cross shouted into his radio, trying to keep his voice steady. "We are taking effective fire from multiple positions. Requesting immediate air support." The response crackled back through layers of static and distance. "Granite Shield, Falcon Ridge actual. Negative on immediate air support. Danger close protocols in effect. Stand by for artillery coordinates." Cross stared at his radio like it had just spoken in tongues. "Stand by? We're getting shredded down here." "Granite Shield, maintain position. Command is evaluating options." Evaluating options. The words tasted like ash in Cross's mouth. He knew what that meant. Back at Falcon Ridge Forward Operating Base, 30 kilometers away, officers would be gathering around holographic displays, measuring distances, calculating acceptable risk, following the sacred protocols that turned soldiers into chess pieces. The 200-meter rule was gospel. No air support within 200 meters of friendly forces. Too dangerous. Too much risk of friendly fire. Better to let men bleed than break procedure. Another explosion rocked the convoy, an RPG that missed a truck by inches, gouging a crater in the desert floor. Shrapnel whined through the air like angry hornets. "They're bracketing us," someone screamed. "They're dialing in the range." Cross pressed his back against the truck, mind racing through options that didn't exist. They couldn't advance, the valley narrowed ahead into an even tighter kill zone. Couldn't retreat. The IED had collapsed that route, and the enemy probably had more surprises waiting. Couldn't call in artillery without better coordinates, and that meant someone exposing themselves to enemy fire to paint targets. Couldn't do anything except die slowly while following orders. The helmet cam footage would later show what happened next with brutal clarity. Private First Class Jordan Hayes, 19 years old, 3 months in country, tried to sprint from one piece of cover to another. The distance was maybe 15 feet. He made it 11 feet before a burst of machine gun fire caught him mid-stride. Hayes went down hard, his rifle skittering away across the sand. He didn't scream, just made a sound like all the air being punched out of his lungs at once. "Hayes is hit! Hayes is hit!" Corpsman Riley was already moving, combat medical training overriding self-preservation. He low-crawled across open ground while bullets kicked up sand around him, reached Hayes, started checking for wounds with hands that wanted to shake but didn't. "I got you, brother. I got you. Stay with me." Hayes' eyes were wide, confused. I can't feel my legs." Riley found the entry wounds, 2 rounds through the lower abdomen, 1 through the upper thigh. Blood was pooling underneath Hayes' body armor, soaking into the sand. Riley's hands moved automatically. Pressure, bandages, tourniquets. But he knew. They were too far from medical evacuation, too pinned down. Hayes would bleed out in this valley unless something changed. All along the convoy, the same story was repeating. Marines trapped. Ammunition running low. Casualties mounting. And from the ridges, disciplined enemy fire continued to pour down like rain. But 30 kilometers away, Falcon Ridge Forward Operating Base looked nothing like the chaos it was trying to manage. Clean prefab structures, organized supply depots, the morning sun reflecting off solar panels and satellite dishes. Everything neat, ordered, controlled. Inside the Tactical Operations Center, that illusion shattered like glass. Multiple casualties confirmed. Ammunition at 60% and dropping. Enemy positions holding fire discipline. This is coordinated. The TOC was a climate-controlled cave of screens and stress, where 23 people tried to fight a battle happening in real time 30 clicks away. Holographic displays showed the valley from 3 angles: satellite, drone feed, and the flickering helmet cam footage from Marines on the ground. The images were chaos made digital. Colonel Frank Garrison stood at the center of it all, a man built like a bulldog who'd spent 30 years learning to make impossible decisions. Right now he was learning that some decisions were more impossible than others. "Sir, they're requesting immediate air support." Major Peters stood beside him, tablet glowing with tactical data. "Distance to nearest friendly forces?" Garrison's voice was gravel and cigarettes, though he'd quit smoking 5 years ago. "Approximately 90 meters to the closest enemy position. Some positions are within 50 meters. Jesus Christ. Garrison scrubbed a hand across his face. "What assets do we have available?" 2 Apaches on patrol, ETA 20 minutes. Fast movers are 45 out. We have 1 A-10 on standby. No. The word came from Captain Rick Donovan, Senior Air Operations Officer. He stepped forward, chest puffed with the authority of someone who'd never made a decision that couldn't be blamed on regulations. "Absolutely not. The 200-meter rule exists for a reason. We cannot authorize close air support in that envelope. It's suicide." Garrison turned to look at him. "We have 540 Marines trapped in a kill zone. And we could turn that into 540 friendly fire casualties if we start dropping ordnance danger close." Donovan's voice carried the righteous certainty of a man defending doctrine. "Protocol is clear, Colonel. We hold position, establish artillery fire missions at safe distance, and wait for the enemy to break contact." "They're not breaking contact," Peters interjected, pointing at the tactical display. "This is a prepared ambush, dug in positions with overlapping fields of fire. They're not trying to harass, they're trying to annihilate." "Then we follow procedure," Donovan's voice rose. "We don't throw protocol out the window because Granite Shield, Falcon Ridge Actual." The radio interrupted, Lieutenant Cross's voice tight with barely controlled panic. "We have 3 KIA, 7 wounded. We are combat ineffective and cannot maintain this position. Request immediate fire support." The TOC went quiet, except for the hum of electronics and distant radio chatter. Garrison stared at the screens showing men dying in real time. Somewhere in his gut, he felt the weight of every regulation, every protocol, every lesson learned written in blood about the dangers of close air support gone wrong. And he made the decision that would haunt him. "Tell them to hold position. Artillery is being coordinated. No air support until we can guarantee safe separation." Peters hesitated. "Sir." "That's an order, Major." The radio operator keyed the transmission, and somewhere in Serpent's jaw, 540 men learned they were on their own. Captain Lena Ward heard the order from across the operations center, and something cold settled in her stomach. She stood at the periphery of the TOC, as she'd stood at the periphery of everything since arriving at Falcon Ridge 4 months ago. Not quite excluded. Not quite included. The permanent position of someone whose presence was tolerated, but not valued. Lena was 31, 5'4", and possessed the kind of quiet intensity that made loud people uncomfortable. Her flight suit was precisely maintained, her hair regulation short, her posture parade ground perfect. Everything by the book, because she'd learned early that women in combat aviation couldn't afford even the appearance of sloppiness. The books hadn't helped much. "Hey, Ward!" Captain Jake Sullivan, another A-10 pilot, leaned against the wall beside her. He smelled like energy drinks and overconfidence. "Looks like your big debut is going to have to wait. Command's keeping all the dangerous toys locked up." Lena didn't respond. She was watching the drone feed, her mind automatically calculating angles and distances. "Probably for the best," Sullivan continued. He never knew when to stop talking. "I mean, no offense, but danger close work? That's not really your thing. That takes a certain kind of aggression, instinct. You're more of a by-the-book flyer, right?" By the book. The phrase that damned her more effectively than any insult. It meant cautious, timid, not a real fighter pilot. "Sullivan, go check pre-flight on Warthog 3, Major Peters said, not looking up from his tablet. "Make yourself useful." Sullivan pushed off the wall with exaggerated casualness. "Copy that, sir. Just saying, when the shooting starts, you want someone with a warrior mentality up there. Not a simulator jockey." He walked away, leaving silence in his wake. Lena's hands didn't clench. Her expression didn't change. 4 months of similar comments had taught her that reactions were ammunition, and she refused to resupply her critics. But inside, something was calculating. She'd studied Serpent's jaw. Not casually, obsessively. 3 weeks ago, during the mission planning for Granite Shield, she'd pulled every piece of intelligence on that valley. Topographical maps, weather patterns, historical insurgent activity. She'd noticed the perfect ambush positions, the natural kill zones, the geometry of entrapment. She'd written a detailed assessment, titled it Serpent's Jaw Tactical Vulnerabilities, submitted it through proper channels. The assessment had been filed under supplemental reading and ignored. Now she watched men die in the exact scenario she'd predicted and felt the hot wire of vindication tangled with horror. "Ward," Colonel Garrison's voice cut through her thoughts. "You're checked out on the A-10, correct?" "Yes, sir. Qualified on the Thunderbolt 2. 200 hours flight time." "Good. Get down to the flight line. If we need to scramble air support, I want assets ready." "Colonel," Captain Donovan started to object. "I said if, Captain. Now move, Ward." Lena snapped a salute and headed for the door, her mind already 3 steps ahead. The walk from the TOC to the flight line took 7 minutes. 7 minutes while the valley bled. The afternoon heat hit her like a physical force when she stepped outside. 115 degrees Fahrenheit, the kind of heat that made asphalt soft and turned metal into branding irons. The flight line shimmered in the distance, where 3 A-10 Thunderbolt 2s sat like predatory insects waiting to hunt. The A-10 was an ugly aircraft by conventional standards, stubby wings, a nose that looked like it had been squashed in a vise, twin engines mounted high on the fuselage. But Lena loved it with the fierce affection reserved for things that were lethal and honest about it. The Warthog was built around its gun, a GAU-8 Avenger rotary cannon that could spit 3,900 rounds per minute of depleted uranium death. Everything else was just armor and engines wrapped around that beautiful, terrible weapon. She reached her assigned aircraft, tail number 81-0964, nose art reading Righteous Fury in faded paint. The crew chief, Technical Sergeant Maria Gonzalez, was running pre-flight checks. "Captain." Gonzalez looked up, surprised. "Didn't expect to see you down here. They finally clearing air support?" "Standby status. Colonel wants assets ready just in case." Gonzalez's expression said what regulations prevented her from saying aloud that just in case meant when the body count gets high enough to justify the paperwork. "She's ready to fly," Gonzalez said instead. "Full combat load, 11 Maverick missiles, full gun ammunition, countermeasure suite active. She'll bite hard if you need her to." Lena climbed the ladder to the cockpit, settled into the ejection seat, began the familiar ritual of strap-in. 5-point harness. Helmet connection. Oxygen flow check. Each action was meditation and preparation combined. Through the canopy, she could see the operations building. Imagine the argument still raging inside. Donovan quoting regulations. Garrison weighing impossible choices. Peter's trying to find solutions in data that offered none. And in Serpent's Jaw, men bleeding out while following orders to wait. Lena's tablet was synced to the tactical network. She pulled up the live feed, watched the helmet cam footage with the clinical detachment of someone analyzing a problem instead of a tragedy. The enemy positions were textbook perfect. Interlocking fields of fire, elevated positions with clear sightlines, probably reinforced positions that could withstand artillery. Taking them out would require precision strikes at danger close range, which meant breaking the 200-meter rule, which meant court-martial for the pilot and the authorizing officer, which meant nobody would authorize it. Lena studied the valley's geometry, the wind patterns, the approach angles. Her mind built three-dimensional models, calculated gun runs, measured margins of error measured in feet instead of meters. There was a way to do it. Difficult, dangerous, but possible. She'd been calculating it for 3 weeks, every time she couldn't sleep, running scenarios, adjusting for variables, memorizing the terrain until she could fly it blind. The radio in her helmet crackled with cross-chatter from the TOC. Artillery prep fires in 15 minutes. Medevac birds standing by, but cannot approach until LZ is secure. Casualty count now at 12. Repeat, 12 casualties. 12 men, 12 families who would get folded flags and empty condolences, and counting. Lena's hands moved across the cockpit controls, not activating anything, just touching each switch and button like a pianist warming up before a concert. Muscle memory and preparation. Master arm. Weapons select. Targeting modes. She could operate everything blind, by feel, the aircraft an extension of her nervous system. More radio chatter. Granite Shield, Falcon Ridge. Artillery mission, abort. Danger too close to friendly forces. Repeat, abort fire mission. A pause, then Lieutenant Cross's voice, raw and desperate. Then what the hell are we supposed to do? We're dying down here. No answer came. Lena looked at her hands on the controls, steady, calm. The same hands that had been called too small for combat flying during training. The same hands that had aced every qualification, every test, every simulation. The same hands that could save 540 lives if she was willing to sacrifice her career. In the distance, a gunshot echoed across the base, the range where off-duty soldiers practiced. The sound was sharp, clean, nothing like the chaos happening in Serpent's Jaw. Training versus reality, theory versus blood, protocol versus survival. Lena had spent her entire career following rules, proving she belonged, playing the game exactly as required because women in combat aviation didn't get second chances. One mistake, one breach of discipline, and she'd be grounded forever with the label of emotional or unstable, or whatever euphemism they chose for "we told you women couldn't hack it." But right now, following rules meant watching men die. She thought about her father, Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Ward, Army Infantry, killed in Afghanistan when Lena was 16. He'd written her letters from downrange, always ending the same way. Do what's right, not what's easy. The easy path is paved with regrets. She thought about the 47 other missions she'd flown at Falcon Ridge. All support missions, all safe, all designed to keep her out of the way while men like Sullivan flew the real combat sorties. She thought about Private Jordan Hayes bleeding out in the sand, wondering why the cavalry wasn't coming. The radio erupted again. Falcon Ridge, Granite Shield, we have enemy reinforcements moving in from the North Ridge. If we don't get support now, we are going to be overrun. Granite Shield, maintain position. Command is, maintain position? We're in a goddamn kill box. Silence from the TOC, the kind of silence that said everything. Lena closed her eyes, took one slow breath, and made the decision that would define her entire life. Her hands moved with sudden purpose. Master power on. A PU start sequence initiated. The aircraft began to hum, electrical systems coming online. Hydraulics pressurizing. The GAU-8 cannon's ammunition drum loaded with 1,174 rounds of 30mm hate. Crew Chief Gonzalez's voice came through the ground crew channel. Captain, we don't have authorization for launch. I know, Chief. Captain, start disconnect procedures, Chief. I'm taking her up. A pause. Gonzalez had been working flight lines for 15 years. She knew what this meant, knew what Lena was about to do. Gear check's complete, Captain. She's all yours. Give 'em hell. The ladder pulled away. Ground power disconnected. Lena was alone in the cockpit, wrapped in armor and composite materials, and the terrible clarity of irreversible decisions. She keyed the tower frequency. Falcon Ridge Tower, Righteous Fury requesting immediate takeoff clearance. Righteous Fury Tower, negative on takeoff clearance. You are not authorized for Tower, Righteous Fury. I have combat emergency, taking active runway. Righteous Fury, you do not have authorization. Abort takeoff procedures immediately. Lena switched off that frequency and taxied toward the runway. The A-10 moved with deceptive sluggishness, ugly and purposeful. Behind her, she could see people starting to notice. Ground crew pointing, officers emerging from the TOC. Too late. She lined up on the center line, advanced the throttles to full military power. The twin General Electric TF-34 turbofan engine screamed, drowning out the radio traffic that was probably ordering her to stand down. The runway stretched ahead, heat shimmer making it ripple like water. Lena released the brakes. The A-10 surged forward, accelerating with the determined inevitability of something that would not be denied. Slower than an F-16, slower than anything sleek or elegant, but with a kind of brutal, relentless power that matched the moment. 80 knots, 100 knots. The radio was screaming now, multiple voices, orders, threats, confusion. 120 knots, 20 shots. Lena pulled back on the stick. The nose lifted. The main gear left the runway. For 3 seconds, the nose wheel stayed planted, as if the aircraft was reluctant to leave the certainty of Earth. Then it lifted too, and Captain Lena Ward was airborne without authorization, without clearance, without anything except the absolute certainty that doing nothing was worse than doing wrong. Behind her, Falcon Ridge erupted into controlled chaos. In the TOC, Colonel Garrison was staring at the radar display with an expression somewhere between horror and disbelief. Who authorized that takeoff? His voice could have cut steel. No one, sir. The air traffic controller looked like he'd aged 5 years and 5 seconds. She just went. Captain Donovan's face turned an interesting shade of purple. That's unauthorized use of military assets. That's insubordination. That's... Shut up, Rick. Garrison's voice was quiet, deadly. He keyed his headset. Righteous Fury, Falcon Ridge Actual. You are ordered to return to base immediately. Acknowledge. Lena switched to a different frequency and didn't answer. Garrison tried again. Captain Ward, this is a direct order. RTB immediately, or you will face court-martial. Do you understand? Static. Major Peters was watching the radar track, his tactical mind already calculating. She's heading straight for Serpent's Jaw. Flight profile suggests aggressive approach. She's going to get herself killed, Donovan said, and probably a dozen Marines with her. We need to recall her now. Garrison stood silent for 5 long seconds, watching the radar blip move toward the valley where his Marines were dying. Sir? Peters prompted. Let her go, Garrison said quietly. Colonel, I said let her go. The words came out like a gunshot. We've left those men to die while we hide behind regulations. If Ward's willing to throw away her career to save them, the least we can do is not shoot her down for trying. He turned to the tactical display where Serpent's Jaw was painted in red hostile markers and blue friendly indicators too close together. God help her, he muttered, and God help us all. Up on. The valley appeared beneath Lena's wings like a wound opened in the earth. She'd seen it on maps, studied it in satellite imagery, memorized every detail until she could draw it from memory. But seeing it in reality was different. The satellite images had been clean, abstract. Down there was chaos made visceral, smoke rising from burning vehicles, the flash-pop flash of muzzle fire from the ridges, small figures that were men, trapped and dying. Lena leveled off at 8,000 feet, high enough to survey, low enough to act. Her breathing was controlled, mechanical. The fear was present, a tight wire running through her chest. But she'd learned to fly with fear, use it, let it sharpen instead of paralyze. The tactical display painted the battlefield in glowing geometries. Blue friendly markers clustered along the convoy route. Red hostile markers dotted the ridges in a pattern that was beautiful and horrifying in its precision. Whoever had planned this ambush understood military tactics at a professional level. Lena began her analysis with the cold efficiency of someone who'd spent months preparing for exactly this moment. 12 confirmed enemy positions, probably more hidden. The main kill zone was a 600-meter stretch where the valley narrowed to less than 200 meters wide. The Marines were trapped in the middle, using vehicles and terrain as cover. Standard doctrine would be to attack the enemy position systematically from distance. Launch Maverick missiles at maximum range. Safe, predictable, ineffective. By the time she'd worked through half the targets, the enemy would adapt or the Marines would be overrun. Lena needed speed, needed to break the ambush's coherence before it crushed the convoy completely, which meant close air support, real close air support. She descended to 1,500 feet, the A-10 dropping like a stone. Wind buffeted the aircraft. The cockpit rattled softly. She was entering the envelope where surface-to-air threats became real, where small arms fire could reach her. The radio crackled, Lieutenant Cross's voice. "Any aircraft in the area? This is Granite Shield. We are being overrun. We need immediate air support." Lena keyed her mic. "Granite Shield, Righteous Fury. I'm 5 clicks out, coming in from the south. Mark your positions with IR strobes." There was a pause, then, "Righteous Fury. Are you authorized for danger close? Does it matter?" Another pause. Longer. Then a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. "Light 'em up, Righteous Fury. Light 'em all up." Below, infrared strobes began to pulse, invisible to the naked eye, but bright as stars through Lena's targeting sensors. The friendly positions stood out in stark relief, and all around them, the enemy. Lena selected the GAU-8 cannon. Master arm hot. Target acquisition mode active. She picked her first target, a machine gun nest on the western ridge, maybe 70 meters from the nearest Marines. 70 meters. Well inside the 200-meter safety envelope, the margin for error was measured in feet. A slight miscalculation, a small wind shift, and she'd be killing the men she was trying to save. Lena's hands were steady on the controls. She rolled into the attack run, the A-10 banking with surprising grace for something so ugly. The targeting reticle settled over the gun position. Range, 900 meters and closing. Wind, 12 knots from the northeast. Altitude, 800 feet, 600 meters. The gun nest was firing in controlled bursts, pouring rounds into a group of Marines pinned behind a disabled truck. 400 meters. Lena's fingers settled on the trigger. The GAU-8 was already spinning up, 7 barrels rotating to firing speed. 200 meters, target centered, perfect angle. Everything aligned. Lena fired. The GAU-8 Avenger roared. People who'd never heard it in person couldn't understand. The sound wasn't just loud, it was violent. A deep, tearing brrrt that seemed to come from the earth itself, like reality was being ripped apart. The entire aircraft shuddered, slowed by the recoil of a weapon that fired rounds the size of milk bottles at 3,900 rounds per minute. 70 rounds left the gun in a 2-second burst. Depleted uranium penetrators moving at 3,400 feet per second. They hit the ridge like the hammer of God. The gun nest simply ceased to exist. Stone, sandbags, weapons, and men were shredded into component atoms. A cloud of dust and debris exploded outward, and suddenly that section of ridge was silent. On the ground, Marines froze in disbelief. Staff Sergeant Cole, pressed against his burning Humvee, saw the ridge explode and couldn't process what he was seeing. Did artillery just... But there'd been no whistle of incoming shells. No time delay, just instant surgical violence from above. Corporal Reeves, the one whose canteen had been shot out earlier, looked up and saw the A-10 screaming overhead, so low he could see panel lines on the fuselage. "That's an A-10! We have air support!" The words rippled through the convoy like electricity. Marines who'd been preparing to die suddenly remembered they were alive. Lena was already banking for the next target. No celebration, no pause, just immediate transition into the next attack geometry. Target 2, RPG team on the eastern ridge, positioning to fire at a cluster of wounded Marines being evacuated. She rolled inverted, pulled through, lined up the shot with the precision of someone threading a needle while falling. Bert! The RPG team vanished in a spray of rock and fire. Target 3, sniper position in a cave opening, maybe 50 meters from friendly forces. She dropped even lower, the A-10 at 400 feet now, close enough that she could see individual figures scrambling on the ridges. The Maverick missile left the rail with a whoosh, its seeker head locked on the thermal signature of the cave. 2 seconds of flight. Then the cave opening erupted, the shaped charge detonating inside the confined space with devastating effect. On the ground, Lieutenant Cross was screaming into his radio. "All Granite Shield elements. We have danger close air support. Mark your positions and get ready to move. We're getting out of this kill zone." Marines who'd been frozen in place began to move with desperate purpose. Fire teams providing cover. Wounded being dragged toward consolidation points. The machinery of infantry tactics grinding back into motion. But the enemy wasn't breaking. Whoever commanded them had discipline and commitment. They shifted positions, adjusted fire, tried to maintain the ambush's integrity. Lena saw it happening in real time. Saw enemy squads repositioning to new firing points. Saw a technical truck with a mounted heavy machine gun racing along a ridge road to get a new angle on the convoy. She punched the throttles forward, accelerating to 350 knots, pulled into a hard climbing turn that grayed her vision at the edges. The A-10 wasn't designed for dogfighting, but it could maneuver when pushed. She came around in a wide arc, lining up on the technical from an angle that would let her fire parallel to the friendly positions rather than across them. Geometry of safety measured in degrees and angles. The targeting computer painted solution. Good lock, clear line of fire. Bert! The technical truck disintegrated. The machine gun tumbled end over end off the ridge, trailing flame. Lena's weapons panel showed ammunition expenditure. 340 rounds fired, 834 remaining, 6 Mavericks left. She was burning through her combat load fast, but speed was survival right now. Hesitation was death. Below, the battle's character was changing. The ambush was losing coherence. Enemy positions that had been coordinating fire were now fighting independently, trying to survive instead of annihilate. Staff Sergeant Cole seized the moment. "Third platoon, on me! We're moving to that ridgeline, suppressing fire now!" Marines erupted from cover, laying down walls of fire while others bounded forward. The tactics they'd drilled 1,000 times, now executed with the fury of men who'd seen salvation and weren't going to waste it. Lena saw the movement, understood the intent, and shifted her pattern to provide cover. She began making gun runs along the ridgeline where 3rd Platoon was advancing, each burst of cannon fire clearing the route ahead of them. It was symphony and slaughter combined. The Marines advancing with coordinated aggression. Lena above them, striking with precision. The enemy caught between hammer and anvil, their perfect ambush turned into a death trap. An RPG streaked up from a hidden position, corkscrewing toward Lena's aircraft with a trail of white smoke. She saw it, yanked the stick left and deployed flares. Burning magnesium bloomed in her wake, dozens of thermal decoys designed to seduce heat-seeking weapons. The RPG went for a flare instead of her engine, detonating in a fireball 200 meters behind her aircraft. Close. Too close. Lena's heart hammered, but her hands stayed steady. She brought the A-10 around, found the RPG team reloading, ended them with a 3-second burst that turned their position into a crater. The radio was chaos now. Moving casualties to LZ Charlie. Enemy breaking contact on North Ridge. Need suppression on grid Echo 7. Lena processed it all, building a mental picture of the evolving battlefield. She could see it now. The ambush was collapsing. Not broken yet, but fracturing. The enemy was transitioning from attack to survival. She just had to maintain pressure, keep them off balance, give the Marines room to consolidate and evacuate. Another gun run, another position obliterated. The GAU-8's ammunition counter ticked down, 623 rounds remaining. And then she heard it. A new voice on the radio. Calm. Professional. American accent with a slight southern drawl. "Righteous Fury, this is Falcon Ridge Actual. Colonel Garrison." Lena's stomach clenched. She'd been so focused on the fight that she'd almost forgotten the consequences waiting for her. "Righteous Fury, do you copy?" She keyed her mic. "Falcon Ridge Actual, Righteous Fury. I copy." A pause. Then, "Captain Ward, what's your fuel state?" Not a recall order, not a court-martial threat, just a tactical question. Lena glanced at her fuel gauges. 30 minutes of station time remaining, sir? And your ammunition?" 600 rounds cannon, 6 Mavericks, full countermeasures. Another pause. Longer. Lena could imagine the entire TOC listening to this conversation. Donovan probably apoplectic. Peters calculating. Garrison weighing impossible decisions. "Righteous Fury, you are not authorized for this mission." "I know, sir." "You violated direct orders, compromised chain of command, and risked friendly fire casualties." "Yes, sir." "You're also saving the lives of 540 Marines who would be dead if you'd followed protocol." Lena didn't answer, didn't know what to say. Garrison's voice changed, became something quieter, almost gentle. "Continue your mission, Captain. Provide support until your fuel state requires RTB. We'll sort out the paperwork later." "Sir, that's an order, Ward. Now get back to work." The transmission ended. Lena blinked away something that might have been tears or just sweat running into her eyes. She'd expected recall, expected threats, expected everything except tacit authorization. Later, she'd learned that Colonel Garrison had just committed his own career suicide by validating her unauthorized mission. That Captain Donovan had walked out of the TOC in protest. That half the officers present were already composing reports that would either condemn or vindicate everyone involved. But right now, none of that mattered. Right now, she had 540 lives to save and 28 minutes of fuel to do it with. Lena rolled into another attack run, and the valley lit up with thunder. The evacuation began at 0923 hours, 36 minutes after Lena had first opened fire. Medevac helicopters came in low and fast, their rotors beating the air into submission. They touched down at rally points that Lena had cleared with systematic violence, loading wounded Marines while door gunners scanned the ridges nervously. Lena circled above like a guardian angel made of titanium and depleted uranium. She was down to 310 rounds of cannon ammunition and 4 Mavericks. Her fuel gauge showed 15 minutes before she'd have to break off and head for base. She'd make every second count. A helicopter lifted off with 6 wounded aboard. Lena saw movement on a ridge, enemy fighters repositioning to engage the departing bird. She put a Maverick into the ridge with surgical precision. The explosion turned the threat into a memory. "Righteous Fury! Granite Shield!" Lieutenant Cross's voice was hoarse but steady. "Final bird is loading now. 90 seconds, and we're clear of the LZ. Copy. Granite Shield. I'll keep them honest." She made one more gun run along the northern ridge, the GAU-8 chewing through rock and sandbags. The cannon fell silent at 240 rounds remaining. She needed to save ammunition for defensive fire during her egress. Below, the last helicopter lifted off, rotors clawing at the thin mountain air. The Marines who couldn't fit on the birds were consolidating into a defensive perimeter, preparing to move out on foot under the cover that artillery could now safely provide. They'd lost 17 men killed, 34 wounded, but 489 Marines were walking out of a valley that should have been their grave. "Righteous Fury, Granite Shield. All personnel clear of immediate danger. We've got this from here. Thank you doesn't seem adequate, but thank you." Lena's throat was tight. "Get your people home, Granite Shield. Righteous Fury is RTB." She turned south, pointing the A-10's nose toward Falcon Ridge. The adrenaline was starting to fade, replaced by exhaustion and the slow dawning realization of what she'd done. Saved 540 lives, destroyed her career, violated every regulation in the book, done exactly what her father would have done. The flight back took 18 minutes. Lena spent them in silence, watching the desert slide beneath her wings, trying to process the fact that in the space of an hour, she'd gone from ignored pilot to either hero or criminal, probably both. The tower's voice crackled in her helmet as she approached. "Righteous Fury, Falcon Ridge Tower. You are cleared for straight-in approach, runway 27. Emergency services standing by." Emergency services. Standard procedure for battle-damaged aircraft. Except her A-10 wasn't damaged, just empty of ammunition and nearly out of fuel. No, the emergency services were for her, for whatever was about to happen when she landed. The wheels touched down with a chirp of rubber on asphalt. Lena deployed the thrust reversers, brought the aircraft to a smooth stop, and began the shutdown sequence with the same methodical precision she'd used to start it. Ground crew swarmed the aircraft immediately. Through the canopy, Lena could see military police vehicles positioned nearby. Colonel Garrison standing beside a Humvee, expression unreadable. A crowd of personnel watching from a safe distance. She popped the canopy, climbed down the ladder on legs that felt disconnected from her body. Her flight suit was soaked with sweat. Her hands were shaking now, not from fear, but from the simple physiological aftermath of sustained adrenaline. Colonel Garrison walked toward her, alone. Two-star general with 30 years of command experience approaching a captain who'd just thrown military discipline in the trash. Lena came to attention and saluted crisply. Garrison returned the salute, then did something unexpected. He smiled. Not a big smile, just a slight upturn at the corner of his mouth. But it was there. "Captain Ward," he said quietly, so only she could hear. "You just pulled off the most magnificent act of insubordination I've witnessed in 3 decades of service. By every regulation in existence, I should have you arrested right now." Lena stood rigid, waiting for the hammer to fall. "But those regulations also say I'm supposed to leave good men to die when there's a viable option to save them. So I'm thinking maybe the regulations need review." He paused. "You're grounded pending investigation. Report to legal at 0800 tomorrow. Until then, you're confined to quarters. Understood?" "Yes, sir." "And Ward?" Garrison's voice softened even further. "Off the record? From one soldier to another? That was the finest flying I've ever seen. Those Marines are alive because you had the courage to do what was right instead of what was safe." He turned and walked away before Lena could respond, leaving her standing on the tarmac with the sun beating down and her entire future hanging by a thread. Around her, the base was returning to normal operations, aircraft launching and recovering, supply trucks moving, the machinery of war grinding forward. But something had changed. Lena could feel it in the way people looked at her. No longer invisible, no longer dismissed. Whether that change would save her or destroy her remained to be seen. Technical Sergeant Gonzalez approached, carrying Lena's gear bag. The crew chief's eyes were wet. Captain, I have a nephew in 3rd Platoon. He was in that convoy. He's alive because of you. Lena didn't trust herself to speak. She just nodded. Whatever happens, Gonzalez continued, whatever they do to you, you did the right thing. Don't let them make you doubt that. In the distance, the radio tower was handling traffic from an inbound flight. Helicopter rotors echoed across the base. Life continued. But in Serpent's Jaw, 17 families would get the worst news imaginable. 34 wounded would begin long recoveries, and 489 Marines would go home to tell the story of the pilot who broke every rule to save them. Lena walked toward her quarters, each step taking her toward an uncertain future. Court-martial or commendation, prison or promotion. There was no way to know. Behind her, an A-10 fired up its engines for a patrol mission, the familiar roar of TF-34 turbofans. Lena smiled despite everything. Whatever happened next, she'd flown her mission, done her job, saved lives that would have been lost. And that, she thought, was enough. The door to her quarters closed behind her with a soft click, sealing her away from the world outside. Tomorrow would bring consequences, investigations, judgments. But tonight, 540 families wouldn't receive folded flags. Tonight, that was everything. Outside, the desert sun began its slow descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of fire and blood. Shadows lengthened across the base. Evening colors sounded across the parade ground. And in Serpent's Jaw, the silence of survival replaced the chaos of combat. The valley remembered, would always remember. The day one pilot chose courage over compliance, and 540 Marines lived because of it. The room was 8 feet by 12 feet of beige regulation walls and government-issue furniture. A cot, a desk, a chair, a mirror screwed to the wall with tamper-proof bolts. The air conditioning hummed with mechanical indifference, failing to cut through the heat radiating from the prefab walls. Lena sat on the edge of the cot, still in her sweat-soaked flight suit, staring at her hands. They'd stopped shaking an hour ago, but she kept looking at them anyway, as if they belonged to someone else. These hands had fired 934 rounds of 30mm ammunition at targets measured in meters from friendly forces. These hands had violated direct orders. These hands had saved lives, or ended a career, or both. The adrenaline crash hit like gravity, reasserting itself after freefall. Her body felt heavy, disconnected. She wanted to sleep but knew she wouldn't be able to. Wanted to eat but felt nauseous. Wanted to process what had happened but couldn't find the starting point of the thought. Someone knocked on the door. 3 sharp raps that made her flinch. Captain Ward? You decent? She recognized the voice. Major Kathleen Peters, second in command of operations. One of 3 women in senior leadership at Falcon Ridge, which made her either an ally or someone with too much to lose by association. Lena stood, straightened her flight suit uselessly, and opened the door. Peters stood in the hallway holding 2 bottles of water and what looked like an MRE. The major was 42, her dark hair pulled back in a regulation bun, showing threads of premature gray. Combat infantry badge, Ranger tab, Bronze Star, a resume written in deployments and difficult decisions. You need to hydrate, Peters said, holding out the water. And eat something. You look like hell. I'm confined to quarters, ma'am. I know. I wrote the confinement order. Now take the damn water before you pass out. Lena took the bottles and the MRE. Peters invited herself inside, closed the door, and leaned against the wall with her arms crossed. The posture was casual, but her eyes were sharp, evaluating. How are you holding up? I'm fine, ma'am. That's horseshit, and we both know it. You just flew the most aggressive CAS mission anyone's seen since Helmand Province, defied direct orders from a colonel, and probably saved 540 lives while ending your own career. So I'll ask again, how are you holding up? Lena opened one of the water bottles and drank half of it before answering. Her throat was desert dry. Honestly, ma'am, I have no idea. Peters nodded slowly. That's the most honest thing anyone said to me all day. She paused. The investigation starts tomorrow. Legal affairs, Inspector General. Probably a congressional inquiry given the optics. You need to understand what you're walking into. Court-martial? Maybe. Depends on which way the wind blows. Garrison is fighting for you, but he's got limited capital. Donovan's already filed 3 separate reports demanding your arrest. Half the brass sees you as a hero. The other half sees you as a liability who proved women can't handle combat stress. The last sentence landed like a punch. Lena had known it was coming, the inevitable weaponization of her gender against her competence, but hearing it stated so plainly still stung. What does the evidence say, ma'am? The evidence says you violated standing orders and executed danger close air support at ranges that would make most pilots piss themselves. It also says 0 friendly fire casualties and a successful evacuation of 540 personnel who would otherwise be KYA. Peter's expression softened slightly. The problem isn't the evidence, it's the precedent. If they exonerate you, every pilot out there thinks they can go rogue whenever they disagree with command. If they crucify you, they're admitting our protocols would rather sacrifice Marines than risk breaking rules. Sounds like they're screwed either way. Welcome to military politics. Peters pushed off from the wall. Here's what you need to know. They're going to dig into everything. Your training records, your psych evals, every flight you've ever made. They'll interview everyone you've served with. And some of those people... She paused, choosing words carefully. Some of those people didn't want you here in the first place. They'll use this to validate their bias. I understand, ma'am. Do you? Peters stepped closer, her voice dropping to something almost gentle. They're going to try to break you, Ward. Not with facts. The facts are on your side. They're going to break you with insinuation. They'll question your judgment, your stability, your motivations. They'll paint you as emotional, impulsive, unable to handle pressure. They'll say you went cowboy because you're female and couldn't hack it. Lena met her eyes. And what do you think, ma'am? Peters was quiet for a long moment. Then, I think you did something incredibly brave and incredibly stupid. I think you're either the best pilot I've seen or the worst soldier, depending on whether you value lives or chain of command. And I think... She stopped herself. What I think doesn't matter. What matters is you survive what's coming. I saved 540 men. You did, and they'll thank you for it right before they hang you out to dry to protect the system. Peters moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing. There's a reporter sniffing around. Jennifer Keating from Defense Today. She got wind of the story and wants an exclusive. Do not, and I mean do not, talk to her or any media. Anything you say will be twisted. Understood? Yes, ma'am. Peters opened the door, then looked back. For what it's worth, Captain, my brother was in that convoy. 3rd Platoon. He's alive because of you. So whatever happens tomorrow, thank you. She left before Lena could respond. The door clicked shut, and Lena was alone again with the humming air conditioner in her own thoughts. She sat back down on the cot, opened the MRE, chicken and rice, and forced herself to eat mechanically. Her body needed fuel even if her brain couldn't process taste. Through the thin walls, she could hear the base settling into evening routine. Distant voices, vehicle engines, the rhythmic thud of boots on gravel, life continuing while hers hung suspended in bureaucratic limbo. Her tablet sat on the desk, synced to the base network. Probably monitored now. Everything would be monitored, but she pulled it open anyway, needing distraction. 47 new messages in her email. Most were automated system notifications, but several jumped out. From Corporal Marcus Chen, 3rd Platoon. Subject, thank you. From Staff Sergeant Maria Gonzalez, Flight Line Crew. Subject, you're a hero. From multiple senders. Subject, various. She didn't open them. Couldn't handle the weight of gratitude or judgment right now. Instead, she pulled up her personnel file, the one she'd memorized but felt compelled to review like checking old wounds. Captain Lena Marie Ward. Service. Number W7734521. Age 31. Flight hours 1,847 total/203 combat evaluations. Consistently above average disciplinary actions. 0 prior incidents. The file was clinical. Bloodless. It reduced a decade of service to bullet points and metrics. Nothing about the extra hours of study. Nothing about the casual sexism absorbed like radiation. Nothing about being good enough to qualify, but never quite good enough to be trusted with the real missions. Until today. She scrolled down to her training scores. Top 15% in her flight class. Expert marksman. Advanced tactical systems. She'd earned every qualification through meticulous preparation and relentless competence. And still ended up flying support missions while men with lower scores got combat assignments. The anger that had been buried under adrenaline and exhaustion began to surface. Not hot anger, cold, calculated. The kind that clarified instead of clouded. Lena closed the tablet and lay back on the cot, staring at the ceiling. The acoustic tiles had 1,247 holes. She'd counted them during her first week at Falcon Ridge, unable to sleep, feeling like an intruder in her own career. Her father's voice echoed in memory. Do what's right, not what's easy. Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Ward had died doing exactly that. leading from the front in Kandahar, taking a position that his lieutenants should have taken because asking soldiers to do what you wouldn't do yourself was cowardice dressed as leadership. The army had given him a silver star posthumously. Lena's mother had accepted it with dry eyes and a handshake that could crush stone. They'd buried him at Arlington with full honors, and Lena had stood beside the grave in her high school uniform, making a promise to finish what he'd started. 10 years later, she was still trying to figure out what that promise meant. Sleep came eventually, fitful and shallow, filled with fragmented dreams of burning vehicles and radar screens and the sound of the GAU-8 tearing through metal and flesh. 7:30 hours. The Legal Affairs Office was located in Building 7, a squat concrete structure that looked like it had been designed by someone who'd given up on aesthetics entirely. Inside, the temperature was Arctic. Someone had set the thermostat to interrogation room, and the fluorescent lights hummed with the frequency of institutional misery. Lena sat in a waiting room that contained 4 chairs, a dying plant, and a poster about operational security that nobody read. She'd arrived 15 minutes early, wearing her dress uniform, alpha blues, perfectly pressed, brass polished to mirror shine. If they were going to destroy her career, she'd at least look professional for the execution. The door opened. A captain she didn't recognize gestured her inside. "Captain Ward." "This way." The conference room was exactly what she'd expected. Long table, too many chairs, a recording device sitting in the center like a mechanical referee. 3 people waiting. Colonel Garrison, Captain Donovan, and a JAG officer she recognized from legal briefings. Captain Bruce Hammond, a man who looked like he'd been born in a suit and never forgiven his parents for it. "Captain Ward, please be seated." Hammond gestured to a chair positioned to face everyone else, the geometry of judgment. "This is a preliminary inquiry into the events of yesterday, 0847 to 0956 hours. This session is being recorded. You have the right to legal counsel. Do you wish to request representation?" "No, sir. I'll answer questions directly." Hammond's eyebrows rose slightly. "Very well. For the record, please state your name, rank, and position." "Captain Lena Marie Ward, a 10-pilot 74th Fighter Squadron, stationed at Falcon Ridge Forward Operating Base." "Captain Ward, let's begin with the events of yesterday morning. At approximately 0915 hours, you initiated takeoff without authorization. Is that correct?" "Yes, sir." "And you were aware that this violated direct orders?" "Yes, sir." "Can you explain your reasoning?" Lena took a breath, organizing her thoughts. 540 Marines were trapped in a kill zone. Enemy fire was intensifying. Command had denied air support based on the 200-meter safety protocol. I assessed that without immediate intervention, casualties would be catastrophic. Donovan leaned forward, unable to contain himself. "You assessed?" "You're a captain, not a theater commander. You don't get to overrule operational decisions because you disagree with them." "I didn't overrule anything, sir. I acted on my training and tactical judgment." "Your training includes following orders." "My training includes saving lives when possible." Hammond held up a hand. "Gentlemen, Captain Ward, please continue." Lena kept her voice level. "I had studied Serpent's Jaw extensively. I knew the terrain, the wind patterns, the approach angles. I calculated that precision strikes were possible at danger-close range with minimal risk to friendly forces." "Minimal risk?" Donovan's voice dripped with contempt. "You fired the GAU-8 at 70 meters from Marines. 70 meters. That's not minimal risk. That's gambling with American lives. And yet, sir, 0 friendly fire casualties." The silence that followed was thick enough to cut. Donovan's face turned an interesting shade of crimson. Hammond made a note on his tablet. Garrison remained impassive, but something flickered in his eyes that might have been approval. Hammond cleared his throat. "Captain Ward, let's discuss your flight history. According to your record, you've logged 203 combat hours, but the majority were support missions, reconnaissance, escort duty. You had limited experience with direct combat engagement. Why did you believe you were qualified to execute such an aggressive mission?" "Because I prepared for it, sir." "Explain." "I spent 3 weeks analyzing Serpent's Jaw. Topographical maps, weather data, historical engagement patterns. I identified the optimal attack vectors, calculated the margin of error for precision strikes, and developed contingency plans for multiple scenarios." Hammond's expression didn't change. "You prepared for a mission you weren't authorized to fly." "I prepared for a mission I hoped would never be necessary, but—" "Yes, sir." "That sounds like premeditation, Captain." Donovan practically spat the words. "You planned to violate orders. This wasn't a split-second decision. You were looking for an excuse to prove yourself. The accusation landed like a slap. Lena felt heat rising in her chest but forced her voice to stay calm. No, sir. I was preparing to save lives if the opportunity arose. The opportunity? Donovan stood up, unable to contain himself. You took an aircraft without authorization, ignored direct orders to return to base, and conducted unauthorized combat operations. That's not opportunity. That's insubordination bordering on mutiny. Captain Donovan. Garrison's voice cut through the room like a blade. Sit down. Donovan hesitated, then complied. His jaw clenched so tight Lena could hear his teeth grinding. Garrison leaned forward, his eyes fixed on Lena. Captain Ward, I'm going to ask you a question, and I want complete honesty. Did you take that aircraft because you believed it was the right tactical decision, or because you wanted to prove something? The question hung in the air. Lena met his gaze directly. Both, sir. Hammond's pen froze mid-note. Donovan made a sound like a pressure valve releasing. Even Garrison blinked. Explain, Garrison said quietly. I believed the mission was tactically necessary. The Marines needed immediate air support, and I was capable of providing it. But yes, sir, I also wanted to prove that I belonged, that I wasn't just a diversity hire or a paper pilot, that I could execute combat operations as well as any pilot in this unit. She paused. Does that change the fact that 540 men are alive today? The silence stretched. Hammond was writing furiously. Donovan looked like he wanted to flip the table. Garrison's expression was unreadable. You admit you had personal motivations beyond tactical necessity, Hammond said carefully. I admit I'm human, sir. Every pilot who flies combat has something to prove, to themselves, to their unit, to the enemy. The question isn't whether I wanted to prove myself. It's whether that motivation compromised my judgment, and the evidence says it didn't. The evidence says you got lucky, Donovan exploded. 1 degree off on any of those gun runs, and you'd have killed Marines instead of saving them. You played Russian roulette with American lives. No, sir. I executed a calculated tactical plan with precision that resulted in 0 friendly casualties and successful evacuation of all personnel. That's not luck. That's skill. Donovan started to respond, but Garrison cut him off with a gesture. Enough. Captain Ward, you're dismissed for now. We'll reconvene this afternoon at 1400 hours. You remain confined to quarters. Do not speak to anyone about this investigation. Clear? Yes, sir. Lena stood, saluted, and walked out of the room with her spine straight and her hands steady. But the moment the door closed behind her, she felt her legs weaken. She made it to the bathroom at the end of the hall before her hands started shaking again. The woman staring back from the mirror looked tired, older than 31. The uniform was still perfect, but the eyes told a different story. Lena ran cold water over her wrists, an old trick her mother had taught her for managing stress. The shock of cold against overheated skin, a physiological reset button. The bathroom door opened. A female lieutenant walked in, saw Lena, and froze. Captain, I didn't know anyone was in here. It's fine. The lieutenant hesitated, then moved to the sink 2 down from Lena. She washed her hands in silence, but kept glancing over. Finally, you're the pilot. From yesterday? Lena nodded. My fiancé is in 3rd platoon. He was in the convoy. The lieutenant's voice cracked slightly. He's alive because of you. I wanted you to know that. Whatever they do to you in there, whatever they say, you saved his life. Before Lena could respond, the lieutenant left, moving quickly like she'd said something she wasn't supposed to. Lena stared at her reflection. The woman in the mirror looked less tired now, less alone. She straightened her uniform, checked her appearance one final time, and walked out into the hallway where the desert heat was already building toward midday inferno. The afternoon session started at 1400 hours sharp, same room, same people. But the atmosphere had shifted, grown colder and more formal. Hammond had a stack of documents now, and Donovan looked like a man who'd found ammunition. Captain Ward, we've reviewed additional materials since this morning. Hammond slid a folder across the table. These are your psychological evaluation reports from the past 4 months. Would you like to review them? Lena opened the folder. The evaluations were routine, quarterly assessments required of all pilots, but someone had highlighted specific passages. Demonstrates high levels of self-imposed pressure to perform. Tendency toward isolation from peer groups. May internalize external criticism. She recognized the trap immediately. Psychological language that could be interpreted as professional dedication or emotional instability depending on which narrative you wanted to support. I'm familiar with my evaluations, sir. The psychologist noted concerns about your stress levels and social integration. Do you believe these factors affected your judgment yesterday? No, sir. I was operating under combat stress, which is different from chronic psychological stress. Donovan jumped in. But you admit you've been under significant pressure. Pressure to prove yourself. Pressure to validate your position in a combat unit. That kind of pressure can cloud judgment. Or sharpen it, sir. That's convenient. Donovan pulled out another document. Let's talk about your training record. You've consistently scored in the top percentile across all metrics. Flight proficiency, weapons systems, tactical planning. You're clearly a skilled pilot. Thank you, sir. That wasn't a compliment. It's an observation that raises questions. If you're so skilled, why have you been primarily assigned to support missions? Why not direct combat operations? The question was a knife disguised as inquiry. Lena knew exactly where this was going. You'd have to ask my commanding officers about assignment decisions, sir. I'm asking you, do you believe you were overlooked for combat missions? I believe I was qualified for more than I was assigned. Because you're female. The words hung in the air like smoke. Lena felt every eye in the room focused on her. This was the moment they'd been building toward. The chance to paint her mission as the act of an emotionally compromised woman trying to prove a point. I believe my gender influenced how my qualifications were evaluated. Yes, sir. So you felt discriminated against. I felt underutilized. And yesterday was your chance to prove everyone wrong. To show up the men who doubted you. Yesterday was my chance to save lives using skills I developed through training and preparation. Donovan leaned back, satisfaction evident on his face. So you admit you had an emotional stake in this mission beyond tactical necessity. You were trying to prove yourself, to validate your presence in a combat unit, to show that women can perform under pressure. Lena felt the anger rising but channeled it into cold precision. Sir, every pilot has something to prove. Every mission is an opportunity to validate training and justify trust. The question isn't whether I wanted to prove myself. It's whether that motivation compromised my judgment or execution, and the evidence clearly shows it didn't. The evidence shows you got lucky. The evidence shows I saved 540 lives with 0 friendly fire casualties, while executing precision strikes at danger close range under combat conditions. If that's luck, sir, then every successful mission in military history is luck. Hammond intervened before Donovan could respond. Captain Ward, let's discuss the actual mission execution. You fired the GAU-8 at distances well inside the safety envelope. Walk us through your decision-making process for the first engagement. Lena switched into tactical analysis mode, grateful for the shift. The first target was a machine gun position on the western ridge, approximately 70 meters from friendly forces. I calculated wind drift, angle of attack, and dispersion pattern. The GAU-8 has a cone of fire approximately 6 feet in diameter at that range. I positioned the aircraft to fire parallel to the friendly positions rather than across them, minimizing angular deviation risk. The burst duration was 1.8 seconds, approximately 70 rounds, sufficient to neutralize the target without overshooting. You calculated all this while flying? Yes, sir, and in planning. I'd pre-calculated optimal angles for multiple firing positions based on topographical analysis. Hammond made notes. That level of planning suggests you anticipated disobeying orders. That level of planning suggests I took my responsibilities seriously enough to prepare for contingencies, sir. Garrison spoke for the first time in an hour. Captain Ward, hypothetically, if you had been authorized for that mission, if command had given you clearance for danger close support, would you have executed it differently? No, sir. The tactical situation would have been identical. So the only difference between a legitimate mission and insubordination was authorization? Yes, sir. And you made the decision to proceed without that authorization because Lena met his eyes. Because 540 Marines would be dead if I waited for it, sir. The room went quiet. Somewhere in the building, a phone rang. Outside, a jet engine spooled up for taxi. Normal sounds of a military base conducting normal operations while inside this room, 3 men decided whether saving lives was worth breaking rules. Hammond closed his folder. Captain Ward, this inquiry will continue. We'll be conducting interviews with personnel who served with you, reviewing your complete service record, and consulting with tactical experts about the risks involved in your mission. You'll be notified when we need additional testimony. Until then, you remain grounded and confined to base. Understood? Yes, sir. Dismissed. Lena stood, saluted, and walked out for the second time that day. But this time, she didn't go to the bathroom. She walked straight back to her quarters, feeling the weight of scrutiny following her like a shadow. Boss. The base was different at 1700 hours. Day shift ending, night shift beginning, that transitional hour when everyone moved between one version of military life and another. Lena walked through it like a ghost, watching people watch her. Some nodded. Some looked away. Some stared with expressions she couldn't quite decode. Word had spread. Of course it had. 540 Marines meant 540 stories, multiplied by however many people each of them had told. By now, everyone on base knew about the unauthorized mission. The question was what they thought about it. She was 50 feet from her quarters when a voice called out, "Captain Ward!" She turned. A young Marine, couldn't be more than 20, jogged toward her. His uniform had the dusty, worn look of someone who'd spent time in the field recently. 3rd Platoon insignia on his shoulder. "Ma'am, I just wanted to—" "I was there, in the convoy. I saw what you did." He was breathing hard, nervous. "They're saying you might get court-martialed. That's bullshit, ma'am. Sorry for the language, but it's bullshit. You saved our lives." "I was doing my job." "No, ma'am. Your job was to follow orders. You did something way harder than that. You did what was right." He straightened unconsciously, coming to attention without realizing it. "Whatever happens, whatever they decide, we know. All of us. We know what you did." Before she could respond, he saluted, sharp, precise, and walked away quickly. Lena felt something crack in her chest. Not breaking, opening. She made it to her quarters, closed the door, and finally allowed herself to feel the full weight of the past 30 hours. Not the fear, or the anger, or the vindication. Just the simple, overwhelming fact that she'd made a choice and people were alive because of it. Her tablet chimed. New message. She almost ignored it, but the sender name caught her attention. Colonel Frank Garrison, personal account. The message was brief. "Captain Ward, off the record. What you did took courage that most of us will never possess. The investigation will run its course, and politics will do what politics does. But I want you to know that, from a tactical and moral standpoint, you made the right call. There are 540 families who won't be planning funerals because you had the spine to act when everyone else chose procedure. That matters more than any regulation. Garrison." Lena read it 3 times, then saved it to an encrypted folder where it couldn't be used as evidence of command bias. The evening stretched ahead, empty and confining. She couldn't leave quarters, couldn't train, couldn't fly, couldn't do anything except exist in suspended animation while others decided her future. She pulled out her tablet again and did something she'd been avoiding. Opened the messages from the Marines. 47 emails, 12 direct messages, 3 video messages. She started reading. "Captain Ward, I don't know you, but my son does. He was driving one of the trucks in that convoy. He called me last night and cried for the first time since he was 12. Said an angel in an A-10 saved his life. I don't care what the brass says. You're a hero. Margaret Chen." "Ma'am, Sergeant Cole here. 3rd Platoon. I've been in for 14 years and I've never seen flying like that. Danger close doesn't begin to describe it. You threaded a needle while we were bleeding out, and you did it without hesitation. Whatever they do to you, know that we've got your back. Marcus Cole. Captain. They're trying to hang you for saving us. That's the military, I guess. Politics over people. But I want you to know that every Marine who walked out of that valley knows the truth. You broke the rules because the rules were wrong. That takes guts most officers don't have. Semper Fi. Lieutenant Nathan Cross." The messages continued. Gratitude, anger at the system, offers of testimony. Each one was a piece of armor against whatever was coming. A knock at the door interrupted her reading. "Captain Ward? It's Major Peters." Lena opened the door. Peters looked tired, her uniform rumpled at the edges. A rare lapse in her usually impeccable appearance. "Permission to enter?" "Of course, ma'am." Peters came in, closed the door, and sank into the desk chair like gravity had increased. "I'm breaking about 6 regulations by being here, so let's make this quick. The investigation is expanding. They're bringing in people from the Pentagon. This has gone beyond a local inquiry." That's good, right? Higher scrutiny means more objectivity? Or it means more politics? Ward, there are people in Washington who see this as an opportunity. Opportunity to prove women aren't ready for unrestricted combat roles. Opportunity to tighten rules around autonomous pilot decisions. Opportunity to make an example. Peters rubbed her eyes. "You're not just fighting for your career anymore. You're fighting a much bigger battle." "I didn't ask for that. Nobody asks for it, but here you are." Peters leaned forward. "I need to know something, and I need complete honesty. Was there any part of your decision that was emotional rather than tactical?" Any moment where anger or frustration or the need to prove yourself overrode pure military judgment? Lena thought about the question seriously, reviewing the mission moment by moment. No, ma'am. I was angry at being sidelined, at being underestimated, at watching men die while we debated protocols. But that anger didn't cloud my judgment. If anything, it sharpened my focus. Every decision I made was based on tactical calculation and training. Peter studied her face for a long moment. I believe you. The problem is they won't. They'll pick apart every choice, every word, every psychological evaluation, looking for proof that you are unstable or emotional or whatever narrative they're building. So what do I do? You stay exactly who you are. Professional. Precise. Unemotional in your testimony. Don't give them ammunition. Don't get defensive. Don't try to justify yourself. Let the results speak. Peter stood. And Ward, start thinking about what happens after this. Best case, you're vindicated but too politically toxic to fly combat missions. Worst case, you're court-martialed and drummed out. Either way, your life at Falcon Ridge is over. The words should have hurt, but they just felt true. Thank you for the honesty, ma'am. Peters moved toward the door, then paused. My brother called me today. He wanted me to tell you something. He said that in the valley, when things were falling apart, he made peace with dying, accepted it. Then he heard the A-10, said it sounded like thunder made metal, said every time you fired, another piece of the trap fell apart, and he realized he might actually survive. She looked back at Lena. He told me to tell you that you didn't just save his life, you gave him back his future. His kids will exist because you broke the rules. Peters left, and Lena was alone again, with the implications of what she'd done rippling outward like shockwaves. She lay back on the cot, staring at the acoustic ceiling tiles. 1,247 holes. She'd counted them before. Now each one seemed to represent a different possible future, a different outcome to this impossible situation. Sleep came eventually, but it was shallow and restless. In her dreams, she was back in the cockpit, but the targeting reticle wouldn't hold steady. The calculations wouldn't resolve. And somewhere below, people were screaming her name while she tried and failed to save them. She woke at 0400 hours, sweating despite the air conditioning, and knew that sleep was finished for the night. Dawn was still 2 hours away. The base was quiet except for the distant hum of generators and the occasional vehicle on patrol. Lena sat at her desk, pulled out a notebook, actual paper, something that couldn't be monitored or subpoenaed, and began to write. Not a defense. Not a justification. Just the truth of what had happened and why. I took an A-10 Thunderbolt II without authorization because 540 Marines were going to die if I didn't. I fired the GAU-8 at ranges inside the safety envelope because precision was possible and delay meant death. I broke regulations because regulations were designed for different circumstances, and blindly following them would have resulted in catastrophic loss of life. I don't regret my actions. I regret that the system forced me to choose between my career and my conscience. I regret that doing the right thing requires destroying everything I've built. But I don't regret that 540 men went home alive. If they court-martial me, so be it. At least I'll know I tried to be the kind of pilot my father would have been proud of. The kind who understands that rules exist to protect lives, not replace judgment. She filled 3 pages, her handwriting getting smaller and tighter as emotions compressed into words. When she finished, she tore the pages out, folded them carefully, and tucked them into her personal effects bag where they'd be safe from official scrutiny. The sun was starting to paint the horizon orange gold. Another day beginning, another day of waiting while others decided her fate. Lena changed into PT gear and did push-ups until her arms burned and her mind went quiet. Then sit-ups, then planks. Physical exhaustion as meditation. By 0600 hours, she was showered, dressed, and ready for whatever came next. The knock came at 0730 hours. Captain Ward, you're needed in the TOC immediately. She followed the messenger across the base, drawing stares and whispers. The TOC was already crowded when she arrived, more people than necessary for a normal operations brief. Something had changed. Colonel Garrison stood at the front of the room, his expression unreadable. Major Peters was there. Captain Donovan, Captain Hammond, and several officers she didn't recognize, wearing Pentagon insignia. Captain Ward, front and center. Lena moved to the indicated position, came to attention. Garrison held a folder in his hands. His jaw was tight, the muscles working beneath the skin. Captain, the preliminary investigation has been completed. The findings are complicated. He opened the folder. From a tactical standpoint, your mission was executed flawlessly. 0 friendly fire casualties. Successful evacuation of all personnel. Precision strikes that exceeded the performance parameters of the A-10 weapon system. From a purely operational perspective, it was exemplary combat aviation. He paused. However, you violated direct orders, took military assets without authorization, and conducted combat operations outside the chain of command. These actions cannot be dismissed regardless of the outcome. Lena felt the floor tilting beneath her feet. Therefore, effective immediately, you are being... The doors to the TOC burst open. A sergeant rushed in, out of breath, holding a tablet. "Colonel, sir, you need to see this." Garrison's expression went from irritation to confusion to something else as he looked at the tablet. "What the hell?" The sergeant turned the tablet so everyone could see. It was displaying a news website. The headline was a massive, bold, impossible to ignore. Pilot's defiance saves 540 Marines. Captain faces court-martial for heroism. Below it, a photograph. Lena, climbing out of her A-10, helmet under her arm, expression exhausted and determined. And below that, a video clip. Helmet cam footage from the convoy. The chaos of the ambush. The sound of the A-10's cannon. Marines cheering as the valley broke open. "It's everywhere, sir," the sergeant said. "Every major outlet. The story broke an hour ago. Someone leaked the footage and..." His voice was drowned out by phones starting to ring throughout the TOC. Multiple extensions. Multiple calls. All at once. Garrison looked at the tablet, then at Lena, then back at the tablet. "Well," he said quietly, "I guess the Pentagon's going to have to decide this one publicly now." And Lena realized that whatever happened next, the story was no longer just hers to carry. It belonged to the world. The TOC erupted into controlled chaos. Every phone line lit up simultaneously, creating a symphony of electronic chirping that sounded like the building itself had developed a pulse. Officers scrambled to answer calls, their voices overlapping in a discordant chorus of "Yes, sir," and "I understand," and "We're reviewing the situation." Lena stood frozen at attention while the world exploded around her. Garrison's phone rang. He looked at the caller ID and his face went pale. "It's the Secretary of Defense." The room went silent except for the remaining phones. Everyone stopped moving, stopped talking, stopped breathing. Garrison answered. "Secretary, this is Colonel Garrison." "Yes, sir." "No, sir. We're still in the preliminary phase. Why, I understand, sir. Yes, she's here now?" "Understood." He lowered the phone, and the look he gave Lena was somewhere between sympathy and warning. "Captain Ward, you're being transferred to Washington, effective immediately. The Secretary wants you in front of a formal inquiry board within 48 hours. Sir, that wasn't a request, Captain. You leave at 1300 hours. Pack your gear. Major Peters will escort you to the airfield." He paused, his voice dropping. "And Ward, whatever happens in Washington, don't trust anyone. This stopped being about you the moment that footage hit the internet." Before Lena could respond, Captain Hammond stepped forward, his expression carefully neutral. "Colonel, I must object. Captain Ward is still under investigation. Transferring her to Washington undermines the integrity of..." "The integrity of what, Captain?" Garrison's voice could have cut steel. "The investigation that was going to bury her to protect the bureaucracy? Or the investigation that's now happening on every news channel in America?" He gestured at the tablet still displaying the headline. "She's not going to Washington for justice. She's going because someone leaked this story, and now the Pentagon needs to control the narrative before it controls them." Donovan, who'd been silent until now, found his voice. "This is exactly why women shouldn't be in combat roles. Too much emotion, too much drama. One unauthorized mission, and suddenly it's a media circus. Rick, shut your mouth before I shut it for you." Peters' voice was ice and razors. "She saved 540 lives. The only drama here is the institutional terror that someone might have actually done the right thing, despite what the rulebook said. The rulebook exists for a reason. The rulebook almost killed 540 Marines." "Enough!" Garrison's roar silenced everyone. "All of you, out, except Ward and Peters. Now!" The room emptied in seconds, officers filing out with expressions ranging from anger to confusion to barely concealed satisfaction. When the door closed, Garrison sank into a chair and scrubbed his hands across his face. "This is going to get uglier than you can possibly imagine," he said quietly. "Someone leaked that footage. Someone with access to classified helmet cam recordings. That means someone inside the military wants this to be public. Question is why?" Peters leaned against the wall. "Could be someone who wants to protect Ward. Public sympathy might shield her from the worst consequences. Or someone who wants to use her as a weapon against military protocol." Garrison looked up at Lena. "You understand what you've become? You're not just a pilot anymore. You're a symbol. Half the country will call you a hero. The other half will call you a rogue element who proves women can't handle combat stress. Politicians will use you to push agendas. Activists will make you a poster child. And the truth, the actual truth of what happened, will get buried under all that noise. Lena finally spoke. So what do I do, sir? Survive. Tell the truth. And remember that the truth won't protect you if the narrative doesn't. He stood, straightened his uniform. Major Peters will brief you on the transfer protocol. I've arranged for a military flight to Andrews Air Force Base. You'll be met by JAG officers and escorted to temporary quarters pending the inquiry. What about my flight status? Grounded indefinitely, pending the outcome of the investigation. He met her eyes. I'm sorry, Ward. I wish I could do more. You could have had me arrested yesterday, sir. Instead, you let me fly. That's more than nothing. Garrison's expression softened fractionally. Your father and I served together in Afghanistan. Different units, but we crossed paths a few times. He was a good man. Stubborn as hell. Believed in doing right over doing easy. He paused. He'd be proud of you, even if it costs you everything. The words hit harder than expected. Lena felt her throat tighten, but forced her voice to stay level. Thank you, sir. Dismissed, Captain. Peters will handle the rest. The walk back to her quarters felt like moving through water. Sound was muffled. Colors were too bright. Reality had that dissociative quality of a dream that hadn't decided if it was going to become a nightmare. Peters walked beside her, silent for the first 100 meters. Finally, you know who leaked the footage? No idea, ma'am. My money's on one of the Marines, someone who wanted to make sure you didn't get quietly buried. Peters glanced sideways. The footage is powerful. You can hear the fear in their voices, hear the gunfire, then hear the A-10. The relief is visceral. It's going to be very hard for anyone to watch that and then condemn you. But they'll try. Oh, they'll absolutely try. The question is whether public opinion forces their hand or hardens their resolve. They reached Lena's quarters. You have 2 hours. Pack light. Just uniforms and essentials. Leave everything else. Why? Because you're not coming back to Falcon Ridge. Win or lose, this place is done with you. Or you're done with it. Either way, pack like you're never returning. The finality in her voice made it real in a way the investigation hadn't. Lena was leaving. The career she'd built, the life she'd constructed, all of it was being stripped away. She went inside and looked around the small room that had been home for 4 months. Not much to pack. A few uniforms, personal effects, photos of her parents. The notebook where she'd written her truth. Her tablet chimed. Another message. She almost ignored it, but the sender made her pause. Jennifer Keating, Defense Today Against Every Instinct, and Peter's explicit orders. She opened it. Captain Ward, I'm the reporter covering your story. I know you've been ordered not to speak to media. I'm not asking you to, but I want you to know that I've spent the last 12 hours reviewing everything I can find about you, your service record, and what happened in Serpent's Jaw. The official narrative is already being constructed, and it's designed to bury you. I have sources inside the Pentagon. They're planning to frame this as an example of the risks of allowing women in unrestricted combat roles. They'll argue that your gender made you emotionally unstable, that you acted out of a need to prove yourself rather than tactical necessity, that you endangered Marines rather than saved them. I can't stop that narrative, but I can build a counter-narrative if you give me access. Not an interview, I know that's impossible, but background, context, the truth of who you are beyond the headlines. You don't owe me anything. But those 540 Marines deserve better than having their lives saved being twisted into proof that women don't belong in combat. If you want to talk, you know how to find me. If not, I understand. J.K. Lena read it twice, then deleted it. But the words stayed, echoing in her mind. The narrative was being written whether she participated or not. The question was whether silence was safety or surrender. She finished packing in 20 minutes. 1 duffel bag, 1 carry-on. Everything else could stay or burn. It didn't matter. Peters returned at 12:30 hours with a security escort, 2 MPs who looked uncomfortable with their assignment. Transport's ready, let's move. The walk to the airfield drew stares and whispers. Word had spread impossibly fast. Everyone knew, and everyone had an opinion written on their faces. Some nodded respect. Some looked away. Some watched with expressions that could have been admiration or condemnation. Near the motor pool, a group of Marines stood in formation, 30 or 40 of them. As Lena approached, one of them, Staff Sergeant Cole, she recognized from the helmet cam footage, called out, "10 Hut!" They snapped to attention as one, then saluted, holding the salute, not breaking it. Lena stopped, returned the salute, her hand trembling slightly. Cole spoke, his voice carrying across the distance. We stand with you, ma'am. All of us. Whatever they do, wherever you go, we stand with you. Peters touched her arm gently. We need to keep moving. But Lena held the salute for 3 more seconds, meeting Cole's eyes across the space between them. Then she dropped her hand, turned, and walked toward the waiting aircraft. The C-130 transport was loud, uncomfortable, and perfect for not having to talk. Lena strapped into the webbing seat, put on hearing protection, and let the engine roar drown out thought. The flight to Andrews took 6 hours with 1 refueling stop. She spent it staring at the cargo straps and trying not to think about what was waiting in Washington. They landed at 21:47 hours local time. The moment the ramp lowered, Lena saw them, a wall of cameras and reporters pressed against a security fence 200 meters away. Lights. Microphones. The machinery of public spectacle. Jesus, Peters muttered. How did they know? Someone told them. A voice came from behind. A woman in army dress uniform, JAG insignia, expression professionally neutral. Captain Ward, I'm Captain Sarah Brennan, assigned as your legal counsel. Please follow me. Do not look at the cameras. Do not make any statements. Move quickly. Lena followed Brennan to a waiting sedan with tinted windows. The cameras tracked their movement, zoom lenses like predatory eyes. She could hear shouted questions even through the vehicle. Captain Ward, are you a hero or a criminal? Did you disobey orders to prove women belong in combat? Should you be court-martialed? The sedan pulled away, leaving the chaos behind. Brennan sat in the back seat beside Lena, already reviewing files on a tablet. Your inquiry hearing is scheduled for 0900 tomorrow. The board consists of 3 flag officers and 2 civilian advisors from the Department of Defense. They'll review the tactical execution, the chain of command violation, and the broader implications for military discipline. What are my chances? Brennan looked up, and her expression was the careful neutrality of someone delivering bad news. Honestly? 50-50. The tactical evidence is in your favor. 0 friendly casualties, successful mission execution, lives saved. But the disciplinary violation is indefensible. You knowingly disobeyed direct orders. To save lives. I know, and that matters. But the military runs on obedience. If they exonerate you, they're saying soldiers can override their commanders whenever they believe they're right. That's a dangerous precedent. More dangerous than letting Marines die? Strategically? Yes. Individual lives versus systemic discipline. The institution will almost always choose the system. Brennan softened slightly. But you have one major advantage. Public opinion. That footage is everywhere. Social media is exploding with support. Politicians are feeling pressure. That might give the boardroom to find a middle ground. What kind of middle ground? Reprimand but no court-martial. Grounded but not discharged. Something that punishes the violation but acknowledges the outcome. She paused. Or they could make an example of you to prove that heroism doesn't exempt you from consequences. Depends which way the wind blows. The sedan pulled up to a nondescript building on the base, temporary quarters for personnel awaiting administrative action. Brennan handed Lena a folder. Your schedule? Briefings at 0700, hearing at 0900, media protocols. What you can and cannot say. She hesitated. Captain, off the record? What you did took guts. Most pilots would have followed orders and lived with the guilt. You chose differently. That's worth something, even if the system can't acknowledge it. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Tomorrow's going to be brutal. The quarters were small, sterile, and anonymous. Lena unpacked mechanically, hung her uniforms, arranged her belongings with the precision of someone trying to impose order on chaos. Her tablet had 63 new messages. She ignored all of them except one. Mom Lena, I saw the news. I'm proud of you. Your father would be too. Whatever happens, remember, doing right is never wrong, even when it costs everything. Call me when you can. Love you. M. Lena's vision blurred. She blinked hard, forced the tears back, and typed a response. Love you too. Will call when I can. She lay down on the bed without undressing, staring at the ceiling. Different tiles here, smooth, featureless, nothing to count. Sleep was impossible. Her mind kept replaying the mission, analyzing every decision, searching for the moment where she could have done something differently. But every alternative led to the same conclusion: follow orders and people die, or break orders and face consequences. At 0300 hours, she gave up on sleep, did push-ups until exhaustion, showered. Dressed in her alpha blues with the same meticulous care she'd given every uniform inspection since basic training. By 0645, she was ready. By 0700, Brennan arrived with coffee and a briefing folder 3 inches thick. The board received over 2,000 emails overnight, 90% in your favor. Several congresspeople issued statements supporting you. The Marine Corps Commandant made a speech about the importance of tactical initiative. Brennan's expression was carefully neutral. The Pentagon is feeling pressure. Is that good or bad? Depends on whether they see you as an asset or a liability. Asset means they find a way to spin this positively. Liability means they sacrifice you to protect institutional integrity. They walked to the hearing room in silence. The building was old, thick walls and high ceilings that had witnessed decades of military justice. The hearing room itself was formal. Wood paneling, flags, a raised platform for the board members. 5 people sat at the platform. 3 admirals, 1 in Navy dress whites and 2 in service khakis. A female civilian in a sharp suit, Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for something Lena couldn't remember, and an older man in Air Force blues with enough ribbons to build a quilt. The senior admiral, nameplate reading Admiral Morrison, called the room to order. This inquiry will examine the actions of Captain Lena Ward on the date in question, specifically her unauthorized use of military assets and execution of combat operations outside the chain of command. Captain Ward, you understand this is a formal inquiry that may result in court-martial proceedings. Lena stood at attention. Yes, sir. You may be seated. The next 3 hours were brutal. They dissected every second of the mission, questioned every calculation, challenged every assumption. The female civilian, Dr. Rebecca Hartwell, was particularly aggressive. Captain Ward, you claim your decision was purely tactical, but your psychological evaluations show a pattern of seeking validation from male peers. Isn't it true that this mission was motivated by a desire to prove yourself rather than tactical necessity? No, ma'am. My motivation was saving Marine lives. But you admit you felt underutilized, that you believed your gender affected your assignments. I believe I was qualified for more challenging missions, yes, ma'am. And this was your opportunity to prove that, to show everyone they were wrong about you. This was my opportunity to use my training to prevent catastrophic loss of life. By violating direct orders. By exercising tactical judgment in a fluid combat situation. Tactical judgment that contradicted your commanding officer's assessment. Tactical judgment that saved 540 lives. Hartwell leaned back, making notes. The ends justify the means, Captain? In this case, yes, ma'am. The admission sent a ripple through the room. Brennan winced slightly, but Lena was done dancing around the truth. I violated protocol because protocol would have killed 540 Marines. If that makes me a bad soldier, so be it. But those men are alive. Their families aren't planning funerals. That matters more than my career. Admiral Morrison raised a hand, silencing the room. Captain Ward, let me ask you directly. If faced with the same situation again, knowing the consequences you now face, would you make the same choice? The question hung in the air like a blade. Lena met his eyes. Yes, sir, without hesitation. Even knowing it would end your career? My career isn't worth 540 lives, sir. Morrison exchanged glances with the other board members. Something unspoken passed between them. Captain, we're going to take a 30-minute recess. Please wait outside. Lena stood, saluted, and followed Brennan into the hallway. The moment the door closed, Brennan turned on her. What the hell was that? The ends justify the means. You just handed them the justification to crucify you. I told the truth. The truth isn't always the best defense. You should have what? Lied? Pretended I had doubts? I don't. I saved lives. If they want to punish me for that, I can't stop them, but I won't apologize for it. Brennan opened her mouth, closed it, then laughed. A sharp, startled sound. You're either the bravest person I've ever met, or the most stubborn. Possibly both. Probably both. The 30 minutes stretched into 45, then an hour. Lena paced the hallway, burning nervous energy. Brennan made phone calls, her voice low and urgent. Finally, the door opened. A lieutenant beckoned them back inside. The board members looked different, less certain, more conflicted. Admiral Morrison cleared his throat. Captain Ward, this board has reviewed all available evidence, testimony, and contextual factors. We find your tactical execution to be exemplary. 0 friendly fire casualties in a danger-close environment represents exceptional skill and judgment. Lena felt a flicker of hope. However, your violation of direct orders cannot be dismissed. Military discipline requires obedience to lawful orders, even when individual judgment suggests alternative actions. The hope dimmed. Therefore, the door burst open. A Navy captain rushed in, holding a tablet, face flushed. "Admiral, I apologize for the interruption, but you need to see this immediately." Morrison's expression went from irritation to confusion as he looked at the tablet, then shock, then something else. Calculation. "Gentlemen, Dr. Hartwell, we need another recess, immediately." The board filed out quickly, leaving Lena and Brennan in confused silence. "What the hell just happened?" Brennan muttered. They found out 20 minutes later when Brennan's phone exploded with messages. She read them, her eyes widening. "Oh my..." "What?" Brennan turned her phone so Lena could see. It was a news alert. Breaking: 540 Marines petition Pentagon to exonerate Captain Ward. Below it, a video. Staff Sergeant Cole, standing in front of a formation of Marines, not 30 or 40, but hundreds, maybe more, all in dress uniforms. Cole's voice was steady, formal. "We, the undersigned members of the United States Marine Corps, petition the Department of Defense to exonerate Captain Lena Ward. On the date in question, Captain Ward saved 540 lives through skilled execution of combat air support in a danger-close environment. Her actions represent the highest traditions of military service, courage, initiative, and dedication to the welfare of American service members. We request that any disciplinary action be waived in recognition of her exceptional service and the lives preserved through her actions." The camera panned across the formation, row after row of Marines, then soldiers, then sailors, then airmen, all standing at attention. The video cut to a press conference, a Congresswoman Lena recognized from Armed Services Committee hearings. The Pentagon needs to ask itself, do we punish excellence? Do we court-martial heroism? Captain Ward saved American lives. That should be celebrated, not condemned. I'm introducing legislation to prevent any punitive action against Captain Ward, and I have bipartisan support. Brennan was scrolling frantically. It's everywhere. Twitter is exploding. Hashtag #StandWithWard is trending. There are rallies being organized outside the Pentagon. This is... She looked up at Lena. "This is unprecedented." The door opened again. Morrison stepped out, his expression unreadable. "Captain Ward, please step inside. Alone." Lena entered. The board members sat in their positions, but the atmosphere had changed. The certainty was gone, replaced by something that looked like controlled damage assessment. Morrison spoke carefully. "Captain, we've been informed of significant public interest in this case. The board's recommendation will take that into account, but I want to be clear. Public pressure does not determine military justice." "I understand, sir." "Do you? Because what's happening outside this room is a political firestorm. You've become a symbol, and symbols are dangerous in military organizations that depend on order and discipline." "I didn't ask to be a symbol, sir. I just wanted to save lives." Morrison studied her for a long moment. "I believe you, which makes this situation even more complicated." He glanced at the other board members. "This board's recommendation will be submitted to the Secretary of Defense within 24 hours. Until then, you remain grounded and confined to base." Dismissed. Lena saluted and walked out of the hearing room into a hallway that felt smaller than it had an hour ago. Brennan was waiting, phone pressed to her ear, speaking in rapid-fire legal terminology to someone who was clearly losing an argument on the other end. "Don't care what the optics are. The law is clear. Yes, I understand the political implications. Fine. I'll relay that." She ended the call and looked at Lena with an expression caught between exasperation and disbelief. That was the Deputy Secretary's office. "They want to meet with you, off the record." "Why?" "Because you're a problem they can't solve with standard procedures. Too public to bury. Too controversial to embrace. They need to figure out what to do with you before Congress does it for them." "When?" 30 minutes. They're sending a car." Brennan hesitated. "Lena, can I call you Lena when we're alone?" "Sure." "They're going to offer you a deal. I don't know what it is yet, but I can feel it coming. And whatever it is, you need to think very carefully before accepting. These people don't offer deals out of generosity. They offer them when they need something from you." The car arrived 22 minutes later, a black sedan with government plates and a driver who didn't make small talk. They drove through Washington in silence, past monuments and federal buildings, until they pulled up to a nondescript office complex in Arlington. "This isn't the Pentagon," Lena observed. "No," Brennan agreed. "It's not." Inside, they were escorted to a conference room on the 4th floor. No flags, no military insignia, just expensive furniture, filtered light through vertical blinds, and 3 people waiting, a man in his 50s wearing an expensive suit, a woman in Navy service dress, and someone Lena recognized immediately, General Patricia Hawthorne, the highest-ranking female officer in the Air Force. The man stood first. Captain Ward, I'm David Merrick, Special Assistant to the Secretary of Defense. This is Rear Admiral Lisa Chen, and I believe you know General Hawthorne. Lena came to attention. Hawthorne waved her off. At ease, Captain. Sit. We're off the record here. Her voice carried the weight of 3 decades in uniform and no patience for bullshit. Do you know why you're here? No, ma'am. You're here because you've created a situation that nobody knows how to handle. You violated direct orders, executed an unauthorized combat mission, and saved 540 lives on camera. Now you're a viral sensation, a political football, and depending on who you ask, either a hero or the reason women shouldn't be in combat. Hawthorne leaned forward. So, before we go any further, I need to know, do you understand the magnitude of what you've done? I saved 540 Marines, ma'am. You did. You also undermined military discipline, validated every critic who says women are too emotional for combat, and forced the Pentagon to either punish heroism or endorse insubordination. Hawthorne's eyes were sharp. Your intentions don't matter anymore. Your actions have consequences far beyond Serpent's Jaw. Admiral Chen spoke next, her voice measured and clinical. The Inquiry Board's preliminary recommendation is censure with suspension of flight status pending further review. Essentially, you'd be grounded indefinitely, remain in service but in a non-combat capacity, with a permanent mark on your record. Lena felt the floor drop out. Grounded, permanently. The board doesn't want to court-martial you. The optics are terrible. But they can't exonerate you without opening the door to every pilot who disagrees with their CO deciding to go rogue. Chen's expression softened fractionally. It's the middle ground Brennan predicted. You keep your career but lose your wings. That's not a middle ground. That's career death. Better than prison, Merrick interjected, which is where you'd be if public opinion wasn't on your side. Hawthorne raised a hand, silencing him. Captain Ward, how old were you when your father died? The question came from nowhere, catching Lena off guard. 16, ma'am. Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Ward. I served with him briefly in Kabul. He was killed leading an assault on an enemy position that his orders said to wait on. Sound familiar? Lena's chest tightened. He was trying to save his men. He was. And he succeeded. 8 soldiers came home because Daniel Ward disobeyed orders and led from the front. The Army gave him a Silver Star and buried the insubordination because dead heroes are easier to honor than living ones who make uncomfortable decisions. Why are you telling me this? Because I need you to understand that you didn't invent principled disobedience. Your father did the same thing. The difference is he died doing it, which made everything simple. You lived, which makes everything complicated. Hawthorne stood and walked to the window, looking out over Arlington. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter. I've spent 32 years in the Air Force. I've been passed over for promotion because I was female. I've been groped, harassed, and told I didn't belong. I've had to be twice as good to get half the credit, and I've watched brilliant women leave the service because the fight to stay wasn't worth the cost. She turned back to face Lena. So when I see a female pilot execute a flawless combat mission and then get hung out to dry for it, I have 2 reactions, pride and rage. Ma'am, let me finish. You saved 540 lives. That matters. But you also gave ammunition to every person who thinks women are too emotional, too impulsive, too willing to break rules. They're going to use you as proof that integrating women into combat roles was a mistake. Do you understand that? Yes, ma'am. Good. Because here's your choice. Hawthorne returned to her seat. Option 1. Accept the board's recommendation. Take the censure, accept permanent grounding, and fade into administrative obscurity. You keep your pension, your benefits, and your dignity, but you never fly combat again. The words hit like physical blows. Lena forced herself to breathe. Option 2. We offer you an alternative assignment, something that uses your skills, addresses the political pressure, and gets you out of the spotlight long enough for this to blow over. What kind of assignment? Merrick took over. We're standing up a new training program at Nellis Air Force Base, Advanced CAS. Tactics for Danger Close Operations, teaching pilots how to execute the kind of precision strikes you demonstrated in Serpent's Jaw. You'd be an instructor, developing curriculum and training the next generation of combat pilots. Lena stared at him. You want to ground me and then make me teach other people how to do what I did? We want to institutionalize your expertise while removing you from operational command. You'd still be contributing to combat effectiveness, but in a controlled environment where you can't make autonomous tactical decisions. In other words, you want to neutralize me. We want to protect you, Admiral Chen corrected, and the institution, This way, you get to keep flying in training environments, and the military gets to claim they're learning from what happened rather than punishing it. Brennan leaned forward. What about her record, the censure? Sealed, Merrick said. Not expunged, but classified. Her public record would show a routine transfer to instructor duty. Clean service record. No permanent damage to career progression. Except I'd never fly combat again. Except that, Hawthorne acknowledged. But you'd still fly, still serve, still make a difference. Just differently than you planned. Lena looked at each of them in turn. Merrick, the bureaucrat who saw her as a problem to solve. Chen, the pragmatist who saw her as a variable to control. Hawthorne, the general who saw her as both a threat and an opportunity. How long do I have to decide? 72 hours, Merrick said. After that, the board's recommendation goes public, and the option comes off the table. And if I refuse both options? Then you face court-martial, Chen said flatly. The board's recommendation is contingent on your cooperation. If you fight it, they'll pursue full disciplinary action. And while public opinion is on your side now, a lengthy trial will give your critics time to tear you down. 6 months from now, the narrative could be very different. Lena stood, needing to move, to process. She walked to the window where Hawthorne had stood and looked out at the city. Somewhere out there, 540 Marines were going about their lives because she'd broken the rules. Somewhere out there, her story was being debated, dissected, weaponized for agendas she'd never intended to serve. Can I ask a question, ma'am? Go ahead, Hawthorne said. What would you do? If you were me, what would you choose? Hawthorne was quiet for a long moment. That's not fair, Captain. I'm not you. I'm not 31 with my whole career ahead of me. I'm not facing the choice between principles and pragmatism at a point where it actually matters. But if you were. If I were, Hawthorne sighed. If I were you, I'd think very carefully about whether dying on this hill is worth what it costs. Your father died on his hill, literally. He saved 8 men and left behind a daughter who spent 15 years trying to finish what he started. Was that worth it? Was his sacrifice worth your pain? The question was a knife between the ribs. I don't know, ma'am. Neither do I. That's the truth nobody wants to hear. Sacrifice is only noble in retrospect when we can measure what it bought. In the moment, it's just loss. Hawthorne stood. Take the 72 hours, Captain. Think about what you want your life to look like. And remember, heroism doesn't pay the bills, but regret will cost you everything. The drive back to temporary quarters was silent. Brennan didn't push for conversation, and Lena was grateful. Her mind was a storm of competing thoughts, emotions pulling in opposite directions. By the time they arrived, it was 1800 hours. Brennan walked her to the door. For what it's worth, the instructor option isn't terrible. Nellis is a good posting. You'd still fly, still make a difference. But not the difference I trained for. No, but maybe that's okay. Maybe making peace with good enough is better than destroying yourself chasing perfect. Brennan handed her a card. My personal number. You need to talk. Call me. Day or night. This decision is yours alone. But you don't have to make it alone. Lena took the card, nodded, and went inside. The quarters were exactly as she'd left them. Sterile, temporary, waiting for her to decide whether they'd be a way station or a prison. She changed out of her uniform into PT gear and ran. No destination, no plan, just movement and the burn of muscles and the rhythm of breath. She ran until Arlington became unfamiliar, until her legs screamed, until thought dissolved into pure physical sensation. 7 miles later, she stopped at a park and collapsed on a bench, sweat-soaked and gasping. Pulled out her phone with shaking hands and dialed. Her mother answered on the second ring. Lena? Mom. Are you okay? I've been watching the news and I need to ask you something. Lena's voice cracked. About Dad. About what he did. Was it worth it? The silence on the other end was heavy. Sweetheart, why are you asking me this? Because I'm about to make a choice that's going to define the rest of my life, and I need to know if sacrifice is worth it, if doing the right thing is worth losing everything. Her mother breathed out slowly. Your father saved 8 men the day he died. Those 8 men have children now, grandchildren, lives that exist because Daniel made a choice. Was it worth it to them? Absolutely. Was it worth it to me? To you? Was it? I don't know. The honesty in her mother's voice was stunning. I spent 16 years angry at him for leaving us. Angry that he chose those 8 strangers over his own daughter. Angry that I had to bury him and raise you alone and watch you turn into him. I'm not. You are exactly like him, Lena. Same stubbornness, Same inability to walk away from people who need help. Same conviction that principles matter more than self-preservation. Her mother's voice softened. And I'm terrified that you're going to make the same choice he did. That you're going to sacrifice yourself on the altar of doing right and leave me to bury another person I love. Lena felt tears running down her face. What do I do? I can't tell you that. But I can tell you what I wish I'd told your father, that living is also a form of courage. That surviving to fight another day isn't cowardice. That sometimes the bravest thing you can do is accept compromise and keep moving forward. They want to ground me, make me an instructor, take away everything I've worked for. They want to keep you alive and in service. That's not nothing. It's not what I earned. No, it's not. Life rarely gives us what we earn. It gives us what we can survive. Her mother paused. Lena, listen to me. You saved 540 people. That's done. That's permanent. Nothing can take that away from you. The question now isn't whether you were right. You were. The question is what kind of life you want to have after being right. Do you want to be a martyr or a survivor? I don't want to be either. I want to be a pilot. Then be a pilot. Teach other pilots. Make the system better from inside it. Your father died trying to change things with one dramatic gesture. Maybe you can change things by living long enough to outlast the bastards who want you to fail. Lena laughed, a wet, broken sound. When did you get so wise? When I had to bury your father and figure out how to keep living. Don't make me do it again, sweetheart, please. They talked for another 20 minutes, about nothing, about everything. When Lena finally hung up, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of fire and blood. She walked back to quarters slowly, her mind still churning, but with more clarity. The anger was still there, the sense of injustice, the frustration at a system that would rather protect procedure than celebrate results. But underneath it all, a question. What did she actually want? To fly? Yes. To serve? Yes. To make a difference? Absolutely. But did she need to fly combat missions to do those things? Did she need to be on the pointy end of the spear, or could she be the person who taught others how to hold it? The answer wasn't clear. Not yet. The next morning brought a summons she didn't expect. Not from the inquiry board or the Pentagon, but from someone else entirely. The message was brief. Captain Ward, please meet me at the Vietnam Veterans Memorial at 0800. Come alone. Colonel Frank Garrison. Lena arrived 10 minutes early. The memorial was quiet at this hour, the black wall of names reflecting the morning sun. She found Garrison standing in front of panel 23E, his hand resting against the polished granite. My father's name is on this wall, he said without preamble. Captain Frank Garrison Sr. died in 1971, 2 months before I was born. I never met him. Lena moved to stand beside him, reading the names etched in stone. He disobeyed orders to extract a surrounded platoon, led a helicopter rescue in conditions that were deemed too dangerous, got the platoon out, lost his own bird on the way back, killed instantly. Garrison's voice was carefully neutral. The Army gave him the Medal of Honor. My mother said it was poor compensation for growing up without a father. I'm sorry, sir. Don't be. I didn't tell you this for sympathy. I told you because I need you to understand something. He turned to face her. When they asked me to testify at your hearing, I had to decide what to say. The truth? That your mission was brilliant and necessary? Or the party line? That you endangered lives and undermined discipline? What did you decide? I told them the truth. That you executed the finest CAS mission I've witnessed in 30 years. That your tactical judgment was flawless. That 540 Marines are alive because you had the courage to act when everyone else chose procedure. He paused. I also told them that if they court-martial you, I'll resign in protest. Lena stared at him. Sir, you can't. I can, and I did. Because I'm tired of watching good people get destroyed for doing right. I'm tired of a system that values compliance over competence. And I'm tired of letting fear of consequences prevent us from acknowledging when someone does something extraordinary. That could end your career. I'm aware. I'm also aware that I'm 53 years old with a full pension waiting. You're 31 with your whole life ahead of you. So if one of us has to fall on a sword, it should be me. That's not fair to you. Fair, Garrison laughed, bitter and sharp. Fair would have been those Marines having air support from the start. Fair would have been you getting the recognition you deserve instead of an inquiry. Fair would be a system that rewards excellence instead of punishing initiative. But we don't have fair. We have politics and procedure and people trying to protect institutions instead of the people who serve them. He pulled an envelope from his pocket and handed it to her. What is this? My testimony, the unedited version before they made me revise it. I want you to read it. Understand that some of us know exactly what you did and why it mattered. Lena opened the envelope with shaking hands. The document inside was 8 pages of detailed tactical analysis, concluding with a paragraph that made her throat tight. Captain Lena Ward's actions on the date in question represent the highest traditions of military aviation. She demonstrated exceptional skill, courage, and commitment to the welfare of service members under her protection. Her violation of standing orders was a violation of procedure, not principle. She chose to save lives over following rules designed for different circumstances. This is not insubordination. It is leadership. If the military punishes Captain Ward for heroism, we send a message that compliance matters more than competence, that procedure matters more than people, and that we would rather lose lives than admit our protocols need revision. I cannot support that message. Neither should you. You wrote this? Every word. And they made me delete half of it before submission. The board version is much more diplomatic, but I wanted you to see what I actually believe, not what I was allowed to say. Lena read it twice more, memorizing the words. Sir, why are you doing this? Because someone should have done it for my father. Someone should have stood up and said that his sacrifice mattered more than the regulations he broke. But they didn't. They gave him a medal and moved on. And I grew up fatherless because the system couldn't admit that sometimes rules need to be broken. He turned back to the wall of names. You have a choice to make, Captain. Take the deal they're offering and disappear into instructor duty. Or fight. Force them to court-martial you publicly and make them defend their decision to punish heroism. Either way, I stand with you, but I need you to understand what fighting means. What does it mean? It means months of public scrutiny. It means your life dissected by media and military investigators. It means every mistake you've ever made weaponized against you. It means becoming a symbol for causes you never signed up for. And at the end of it all, you might still lose. But I might win. You might. Public pressure is intense. Congress is paying attention. If you force this into the open, they might not be able to bury you. But it's a gamble, and the stakes are your entire future. Lena looked at the names on the wall. 58,000 people who died in service. How many of them had made impossible choices? How many had sacrificed everything for principles that nobody remembered? What do you think I should do, sir? I think you should ask yourself what kind of life you want to live. One where you compromised to survive, or one where you stood your ground and dealt with the consequences. He met her eyes. There's no wrong answer, Captain. Only the answer you can live with. Lena spent the next 48 hours in isolation, thinking. She ran. She read. She reviewed every moment of the Serpent's Jaw mission, analyzing it from every angle. She thought about her father, dying at 38 because he couldn't walk away from soldiers who needed help. She thought about her mother, spending 16 years raising a daughter alone because her husband had chosen principle over presence. She thought about 540 Marines, alive and breathing, because one pilot had decided that saving lives mattered more than saving her career, and she thought about what kind of person she wanted to be. On the third morning, she called Brennan. I've made my decision. And? I want to fight. No deal, no compromise. If they want to court-martial me for saving lives, make them do it publicly. Brennan was quiet for a long moment. You're sure? Completely. Okay, then let's prepare for war, because that's what this is going to be. The notification came 6 hours later. The Inquiry Board's official recommendation, court-martial proceedings for unauthorized use of military assets, violation of direct orders, and conduct prejudicial to good order and discipline. The news broke at 1800 hours. Every major outlet led with it. The response was immediate and explosive. By 2000 hours, protests had erupted outside the Pentagon. Veterans, active duty, civilians, all demanding the charges be dropped. By 2200 hours, 3 senators had issued statements condemning the decision. By midnight, #court-martial. Heroism was the #1 trending topic worldwide. And Lena Ward, sitting in her temporary quarters watching the world catch fire on her behalf, felt something she hadn't felt in days. Not fear, not anger, certainty. She'd made her choice. Now she'd see it through, whatever the cost. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered anyway. Captain Ward? This is Jennifer Keating, Defense Today. I know you've been told not to talk to media, but I wanted you to know something. I've spent 3 days investigating your service record, your background, your training, and I found something the Pentagon doesn't want public. What? Your father's file. The real one, not the sanitized version. I know what he did. I know how he died. And I know the Army covered up the insubordination because dead heroes are easier to honor than living ones. Keating paused. You're not the first ward to choose lives over orders, and I think people deserve to know that. Why are you telling me this? Because the Pentagon is going to try to paint you as an unstable woman who couldn't handle pressure. I can paint a different picture. A daughter following in her father's footsteps. A family legacy of principled courage. A pattern of the military punishing the very values it claims to celebrate. Another pause. I can't promise it'll save you, but I can promise the truth will be told. Lena closed her eyes, thought about her father's name on that wall, thought about what her mother had said about martyrdom versus survival. Do it, she said quietly. Tell the truth. All of it. You understand this might make things worse before they get better? I understand, but I'm done hiding, done apologizing, done letting other people define what I did and why it mattered. Then we're going to make them regret coming after you, Captain. I promise you that. The call ended. Lena sat in silence, feeling the weight of decisions made and consequences accepted. Tomorrow, the court-martial process would begin. Tomorrow, she'd become a battlefield where competing visions of military culture waged war. But tonight, she was just a pilot who'd saved 540 lives and refused to apologize for it. That would have to be enough. Outside her window, Arlington glowed with city lights. Somewhere out there, 540 families slept peacefully because she'd been willing to break the rules. Somewhere out there, her future was being decided by people who'd never flown combat, never faced impossible choices, never had to choose between career and conscience. Let them judge. She'd already won the only battle that mattered. The morning of the court-martial arrived with the kind of crisp clarity that made everything feel too real. Lena stood in front of the mirror in her dress blues, adjusting the brass until it caught the light perfectly. Each movement was ritual and meditation combined, a way to quiet the storm inside her chest. Brennan knocked at 0630 hours. You ready? As I'll ever be. The drive to the courthouse was surreal. Protesters lined the streets, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. Some held signs reading "Stand with Ward" and "Heroism isn't a crime." Others held opposing messages. Discipline matters, and orders exist for a reason. The whole country had picked sides, and Lena was the line they were fighting across. Inside the courthouse, the atmosphere was tomb quiet. Military police lined the hallways. Cameras waited outside, held back by security, but present, recording, turning everything into spectacle. The courtroom was formal and austere. Wood paneling. The seal of the Department of Defense. 5 officers sitting in judgment. 3 colonels, 1 brigadier general, and a major general serving as president of the court. All male, all older. All representing the system she'd defied. The prosecution was led by Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Reed, a JAG officer with a reputation for aggressive litigation and a 94% conviction rate. He'd spent the past week in media appearances, carefully building the narrative that Lena represented a dangerous precedent, that emotional decision-making masquerading as heroism could undermine the entire military chain of command. Brennan leaned close as they took their seats. Reed's going to come at you hard. He'll try to provoke an emotional response, make you seem unstable. Stay calm, stay professional, let the facts speak. I understand. The Major General, nameplate reading Major General Whitaker, called the court to order. This court-martial convenes to address charges against Captain Lena Marie Ward. The charges are Article 92, failure to obey order or regulation, Article 134, conduct prejudicial to good order and discipline. Captain Ward, how do you plead? Lena stood. Not guilty on all charges, sir. Very well. Lieutenant Colonel Reed, you may proceed with opening statements. Reed stood, buttoning his jacket with practiced precision. He was 52, silver-haired, and possessed the kind of courtroom presence that came from decades of winning. Gentlemen of the court, this case is not complicated. On the date in question, Captain Ward directly violated lawful orders from her commanding officer. She took military assets without authorization. She executed combat operations in clear defiance of established protocols. These are facts, not opinions. They are documented, recorded, and undeniable. He paced slowly, letting his words settle. The defense will argue that the outcome justifies these violations, that because Captain Ward's unauthorized mission succeeded, we should overlook her blatant disregard for military discipline. But this argument is dangerous. If we excuse disobedience when it produces positive results, we create a precedent that any pilot, any soldier, can override their commanders whenever they believe they know better. This is not military order. This is chaos. Reed turned to face Lena directly. Captain Ward is a skilled pilot. No one disputes this. But skill does not exempt anyone from obedience. Competence does not justify insubordination. And good intentions do not erase the fundamental requirement that soldiers follow orders. He paused. The prosecution will demonstrate that Captain Ward's actions, while superficially heroic, represent a pattern of emotional decision-making rooted in a need to prove herself in a male-dominated field. We will show that her gender-related insecurities led to impulsive choices that endangered lives and undermined the chain of command. And we will prove that excusing these actions threatens the very foundation of military discipline. He sat down. The courtroom was silent. Brennan stood, and Lena noticed she didn't button her jacket, a small signal of informality that contrasted with Reed's rigid formality. Gentlemen, Lieutenant Colonel Reed is correct about one thing. This case is not complicated. Captain Ward saved 540 American lives. Everything else is noise. She moved to stand in front of the court, her posture relaxed but confident. The prosecution will spend days trying to convince you that Captain Ward is emotional, unstable, driven by gender-related insecurities. They'll dissect her psychological evaluations, question her motivations, and paint her as someone who couldn't handle the pressure of combat aviation. But here's what they can't dispute: 0 friendly fire casualties, successful evacuation of all personnel, tactical execution that exceeded the performance parameters of the A-10 weapons system. Brennan picked up a tablet and displayed helmet cam footage on the courtroom screens. This is Serpent's Jaw. This is what Captain Ward faced. Marines trapped in a kill zone, enemy fire from all directions, casualty count rising. Command denied air support based on the 200-meter safety protocol, a protocol designed for different circumstances, different terrain, different tactical situations. Captain Ward assessed that precision strikes were possible at danger close range. She calculated wind drift, angle of attack, dispersion patterns, and she executed perfectly. The footage played. The chaos. The gunfire. The A-10's cannon tearing through enemy positions. The relief in the Marines' voices. The prosecution wants you to focus on what Captain Ward did wrong. We want you to focus on what she did right. She saved lives using skill, training, and tactical judgment that any combat pilot would be proud of. The only difference between her mission and dozens of authorized CAS operations is that she acted before permission could be granted. She chose lives over procedure, and 540 families aren't planning funerals because of it. Brennan returned to her seat, and the battle lines were drawn. The prosecution's case took 3 days. They called witnesses who testified about the importance of following orders. They presented Lena's psychological evaluations with carefully selected quotes highlighting stress and pressure. They brought in tactical experts who explained why the 200-meter rule existed and why violating it was dangerous. Reed was methodical, building his case brick by brick. But when he called Captain Jake Sullivan to the stand, Lena felt the first crack in his foundation. Sullivan took the oath, settled into the witness chair with the easy confidence of someone who'd never been challenged. Captain Sullivan, you served with Captain Ward at Falcon Ridge. Can you describe her behavior during that time? Sure. Lena, Captain Ward, was always kind of separate from the rest of us. Didn't socialize much, spent a lot of time alone, studying, preparing. She seemed pretty focused on proving herself. Proving herself how? Well, she's a woman in combat aviation. That comes with certain pressures. I think she felt like she had to work twice as hard to get the same respect, which is understandable, but it also creates stress. Did this stress affect her judgment? I can't say for certain, but I always felt like she was wound pretty tight, like she was waiting for an opportunity to show everyone she belonged. Reed nodded, satisfied. And in your professional opinion, could this need to prove herself have influenced her decision to execute an unauthorized mission? Objection, Brennan called. Calls for speculation. Sustained, Whitaker ruled. But the damage was done. The implication hung in the air. When Brennan stood for cross-examination, her expression was dangerously calm. Captain Sullivan, how many combat hours do you have logged? 237. And Captain Ward? I'm not sure exactly. 203, 34 fewer than you. Yet she was primarily assigned to support missions while you flew direct combat operations. Why is that? Sullivan shifted uncomfortably. I couldn't say. Assignment decisions are made by command. But you have theories, don't you? You testified that Captain Ward felt pressure to prove herself. Why would a pilot with nearly identical experience to yours feel that pressure? Like I said, she's a woman, and you're a man. Are those the only relevant qualifications for combat assignment? Reed stood. Objection, relevance. I'm establishing bias, Your Honor. The witness has made assumptions about Captain Ward's mental state. I'm exploring whether those assumptions are based on evidence or prejudice. I'll allow it, Whitaker said. Answer the question, Captain. Sullivan's jaw tightened. No, there are other qualifications. such as flight performance, tactical judgment, ability to work under pressure. Captain Ward exceeded you in all of those categories according to training evaluation, so why were you flying combat missions while she flew reconnaissance? I don't make assignment decisions, but you benefit from them, don't you? You get the glory missions, the combat ribbons, the career advancement, while Captain Ward, equally qualified, gets sidelined. And when she finally proves her capability by executing a flawless combat mission, you call it emotional instability driven by gender pressure. That's not what You testified that she was wound pretty tight and waiting for an opportunity to prove herself. Were you in Serpent's Jaw, Captain? No. Did you execute any danger close CAS missions during your time at Falcon Ridge? No. So you have no first-hand knowledge of the tactical situation Captain Ward faced, no experience executing the kind of precision strikes she performed, and no basis for judging whether her actions were driven by competence or instability. Is that correct? Sullivan's face was red. I was describing her general behavior. You were describing your perception of her general behavior filtered through your own biases about women in combat roles. No further questions. The courtroom buzzed with whispered conversations. Whitaker called for order. Reed tried to recover, calling more witnesses, presenting more evidence. But Brennan had exposed the undercurrent of sexism running through the prosecution's case, and once seen, it couldn't be unseen. Bucket. On the fourth day, Brennan called her first witness, Staff Sergeant Marcus Cole. Cole took the stand in his dress blues, chest decorated with the ribbons of someone who'd seen real combat. He looked directly at Lena as he was sworn in and nodded slightly. Brennan approached. Staff Sergeant Cole, where were you on the date in question? Serpent's Jaw, ma'am. Convoy security for Operation Granite Shield. Describe what happened. Cole's voice was steady, professional. We were ambushed at approximately 0847 hours. Multiple enemy positions, heavy weapons fire. We took casualties immediately. The kill zone was approximately 600 meters long, with enemy positions on both ridges at elevations giving them clear fields of fire. What did command order you to do? Hold position, wait for artillery support. And what was your assessment of that order? That we'd be dead before artillery could be coordinated. The enemy had us dialed in. They were systematically destroying our defensive positions. We had wounded who couldn't be moved. We were being overrun. Brennan pulled up the tactical display. When did the situation change? When we heard the A-10, approximately 0915 hours. We didn't know who was flying it. Command hadn't authorized air support, but someone was up there, and they were taking out enemy positions with surgical precision. How close were these strikes to your position? Some were within 70 meters, close enough that we could feel the concussion, close enough that if the pilot had been off by even a few degrees, we'd have been hit. Were you afraid of friendly fire? Cole met her eyes. Ma'am, I was afraid of dying. The friendly fire risk was nothing compared to the certainty of being overrun. Captain Ward, he looked at Lena. She threaded a needle while we were bleeding out. Every burst of that cannon cleared another position. Every missile strike bought us more time. She didn't just save us. She gave us the space to save ourselves. In your professional military opinion, was Captain Ward's action necessary? Absolutely. Without her intervention, my entire platoon would be KIA. All of us. There's no doubt in my mind. Reed stood for cross-examination, but his usual confidence seemed diminished. Staff Sergeant, you're grateful to Captain Ward. That's understandable, but gratitude doesn't change the fact that she violated orders. With respect, sir, she violated orders that would have killed us. You don't know that. Artillery might have... Sir, I've been doing this for 14 years. I know when a position is untenable. We were dead if someone didn't act. Captain Ward acted. We're alive. That's not gratitude talking. That's fact. Reed tried several more angles, but Cole was unshakable. He'd been there. He'd lived it. His testimony carried the weight of someone who'd faced death and walked away. Brennan called 11 more Marines. Each told the same story from different angles. The ambush, the casualties, the desperation, the attend that appeared like an answer to prayers they hadn't had time to say. By the end of the second day of defense testimony, the courtroom had heard from 12 combat veterans who credited Lena with saving their lives. The emotional impact was undeniable. Then Brennan called her final witness, General Patricia Hawthorne. The courtroom went silent as Hawthorne took the stand. 3-star general, highest-ranking woman in the Air Force, a legend in military aviation circles. Brennan approached respectfully. General Hawthorne, you've reviewed the tactical data from Captain Ward's mission? I have. Multiple times. What's your professional assessment? Hawthorne's voice was clear and authoritative. Captain Ward executed one of the most impressive CAS missions I've reviewed in 32 years of service. The precision required to engage targets at that range, in that terrain, with that level of friendly forces proximity is extraordinary. Most pilots wouldn't attempt it. The few who would attempt it would likely fail. Why did Captain Ward succeed where others would fail? Preparation and skill. She'd studied that valley, knew the wind patterns, the approach angles, the tactical geometry. When the moment came, she didn't improvise. She executed a plan she'd already developed. That's not impulsive, that's professional. The prosecution argues her actions were driven by emotional needs rather than tactical judgment. Hawthorne's expression hardened. I've heard that argument. It's the same argument used to keep women out of combat roles for decades. Anytime a woman makes a bold decision, it's called emotional. Anytime a man makes the same decision, it's called leadership. Captain Ward's gender is irrelevant to the tactical soundness of her mission. She looked directly at the court. Gentlemen, you're facing a choice. You can punish Captain Ward for violating protocol, which sends a message that the military values procedure over results, compliance over competence. Or you can acknowledge that sometimes extraordinary situations require extraordinary actions and trust your people to exercise judgment. If you choose the former, you'll lose your best people. The ones who think critically, who take initiative, who refuse to hide behind regulations when lives are at stake. If you choose the latter, you create a military that learns from this incident rather than being paralyzed by it. Reed's cross-examination was brief and ineffective. You couldn't shake a 3-star general with 30 years of combat experience. The closing arguments came on day 7. Reed went first, his voice measured and serious. Gentlemen, this case has become emotionally charged. We've heard moving testimony from Marines whose lives were saved. We've heard passionate arguments about the importance of tactical initiative, but we cannot lose sight of the fundamental issue. Military discipline requires obedience to lawful orders. Captain Ward violated that principle. If we excuse her violation, we undermine the chain of command that every military operation depends on. The prosecution recommends dishonorable discharge and confinement. Let this case send a message that no one, regardless of outcome, is above military law. Brennan stood for her closing, and Lena could see the fire in her eyes. Lieutenant Colonel Reed wants you to send a message. Let's talk about messages. If you convict Captain Ward, you send a message that the military would rather sacrifice lives than adapt protocols. You send a message that following orders matters more than achieving the mission. You send a message that extraordinary competence, when exercised by a woman, will be punished as emotional instability. She moved to stand directly in front of the court. But there's another message you could send. You could acknowledge that Captain Ward faced an impossible situation and made the right call. You could recognize that 540 American service members are alive because one pilot had the courage to act when everyone else was paralyzed by procedure. You could admit that sometimes, rarely, but sometimes, breaking the rules is exactly what military values demand. Brennan's voice softened. I'm not asking you to excuse all insubordination. I'm asking you to recognize the difference between defiance and leadership. Captain Ward didn't act out of ego or instability. She acted because Marines were dying and she had the skill to save them. She calculated the risks. She executed flawlessly. And she accepted the consequences without complaint or regret. She returned to her seat. The defense recommends full acquittal, not because what Captain Ward did was easy or comfortable, but because it was right. And sometimes being right matters more than being obedient. The court retired to deliberate. The wait was excruciating. 3 hours, 4, 6. Lena sat in a side room with Brennan, neither of them speaking much. What was there to say? The decision was out of their hands now, being made by 5 officers behind closed doors. At 1847 hours, they were summoned back to the courtroom. The gallery was packed. Media, military personnel, veterans, supporters, critics. Every seat filled, the air thick with anticipation. Major General Whitaker returned to his position. His expression was carefully neutral, revealing nothing. This court has reached a verdict. Captain Ward, please rise. Lena stood. Her legs felt disconnected from her body. Brennan stood beside her, hand briefly touching Lena's arm in silent support. On the charge of Article 92, failure to obey order or regulation, this court finds the defendant— The pause felt eternal. Guilty. Lena's heart dropped. However, the court recognizes extraordinary extenuating circumstances. On the charge of Article 134, conduct prejudicial to good order and discipline, this court finds the defendant not guilty. Whitaker continued, his voice formal but carrying an undercurrent of something else. Respect. maybe, or acknowledgement. While Captain Ward's violation of direct orders cannot be excused, this court acknowledges the tactical necessity of her actions and the lives preserved as a result. Therefore, the sentence is as follows. Reduction in rank to first lieutenant suspended. Forfeiture of pay for 3 months suspended. Letter of reprimand to be placed in permanent file. He paused, looking directly at Lena. Additionally, this court recommends, and I want to be clear, this is a recommendation, not a requirement, that Captain Ward be assigned to the Advanced CAS training program at Nellis Air Force Base, where her expertise can benefit the entire service. The prosecution's request for discharge is denied. Captain Ward will retain her commission and flight status. The courtroom erupted. Gasps, applause from some sections, angry muttering from others. The MPs called for order. Lena stood frozen, trying to process what had just happened. Guilty, but not punished. Convicted, but vindicated. The impossible middle ground. Brennan was grinning. We won. It's not perfect, but we won. Reed was packing his briefcase with sharp, angry movements. He'd lost, and it showed. Whitaker wasn't finished. One final statement. This court does not condone disobedience. We do not encourage pilots to override their commanders, but we also recognize that warfare is not conducted by algorithm. It requires judgment, initiative, and the courage to make difficult decisions under impossible circumstances. Captain Ward demonstrated those qualities. The military is better served by harnessing that capability than destroying it. He brought down the gavel. This court-martial is concluded. The aftermath was chaos. Media swarmed the courthouse steps. Lena was hustled to a side exit, but the questions followed. Captain Ward, how do you feel about the verdict? Will you accept the teaching position? Do you have any regrets? She didn't answer, couldn't answer. Her mind was still processing the reality that she'd been convicted and freed in the same breath. A car waited. Black sedan. Military plates. The driver held the door open. Inside, waiting, was Colonel Garrison. Get in, Captain. Let's get you out of here. Lena slid into the back seat. Brennan climbed in beside her. The car pulled away from the courthouse, leaving the circus behind. Congratulations, Garrison said. You survived. I got convicted. You got a suspended sentence and a recommendation for one of the most prestigious instructor positions in the Air Force. Under the circumstances, I'd call that a win. Lena looked out the window at Washington sliding past. What happens now? Now you decide whether to accept the Nellis position or request alternative assignment. Now you figure out what kind of career you want to have after this. Now you live with being the pilot who broke the rules and got away with it. I didn't get away with anything. I have a conviction on my record. A conviction nobody will care about in 5 years. What they'll remember is that you saved 540 lives. That's your legacy now. Question is what you do with it. The car pulled up to a hotel in Arlington, nicer than the temporary quarters she'd been staying in. Garrison handed her a keycard. You've got 3 days of leave. Rest, think, decide. Then report to my office and we'll discuss your next assignment. He paused. And Ward, off the record, I'm proud of you. What you did took guts that most of us will never have. Don't let anyone make you forget that. He left. Brennan walked her up to the room, a suite on the 8th floor with a view of the Potomac. Get some sleep, Brennan said. Tomorrow the media circus starts again. But tonight, just rest. Thank you for everything. I didn't do much. You won this by being exactly who you are. Brennan smiled. That's rarer than you think. Alone finally, Lena stood at the window and watched the sun set over the city. Somewhere out there, 540 Marines were going about their lives. Somewhere, her story was being debated, dissected, turned into symbol and argument. But here, in this quiet room, she was just a pilot who'd made a choice and lived with the consequences. Her phone buzzed. A message from her mother. I'm proud of you, sweetheart. Your father would be too. Lena felt tears running down her face. Not sad tears, not happy tears, just release. 3 weeks later, Lena stood on the flight line at Nellis Air Force Base watching student pilots run pre-flight checks on a row of A-10s. The desert heat was familiar, comforting. This was her element. Not courtrooms or media interviews, but flight lines and aircraft and the smell of jet fuel mixing with sand. She'd accepted the instructor position, not because it was safe or easy, but because she'd realized something during those 3 days of leave, teaching the next generation of pilots how to make hard decisions, how to execute danger-close strikes, how to balance protocol with tactical reality. That was worth doing. Maybe more worth doing than flying combat missions herself. Major Peters had transferred to Nellis as well, heading up the tactical development program. She approached now, carrying 2 cups of coffee. Your students are terrified of you. Good. I'm not that scary. You're the pilot who got court-martialed for heroism and walked away with a suspended sentence. You're a legend. That's inherently terrifying. Peters handed over one of the coffees. How does it feel, being back in the cockpit? Different. But good different. Lena took a sip. I'm not fighting to prove I belong anymore. I'm just doing the job. That's what maturity looks like. Took you long enough. They watched in comfortable silence as the student pilots completed their checks and began climbing into cockpits. Young faces, nervous energy, the next generation preparing to take on the same impossible missions, the same hard choices. One of them, a young woman, barely 25, approached nervously. Captain Ward, I just wanted to say, your story is why I applied for combat aviation. You proved that women can do this job as well as anyone, better than most. Lena studied her, saw herself 5 years ago, eager, determined, ready to prove the world wrong. What's your name? Lieutenant Sarah Chen, ma'am. Listen to me, Lieutenant. Don't try to prove anything. Don't fly to validate your gender or silence critics, or be a symbol. Fly because you love it, and you're good at it. Fly because saving lives matters, and you have the skills to do it. Everything else is noise. Chen nodded, absorbing the words. Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. She walked away, and Peter smiled. Good advice. Advice I wish someone had given me. Lena checked her watch. I've got a briefing in 20, tactical scenario development. Go teach them how to thread needles while people are shooting at them. That's the plan. Lena walked toward the operations building, her flight suit crisp in the desert sun. Behind her, an A-10 fired up its engines, that familiar, beautiful roar of TF-34 turbofans spinning to life. She'd never flown Serpent's Jaw again. Never needed to. That mission had defined her, but it didn't own her. She'd made her choice, paid her price, and walked away with her wings intact. The letter of reprimand sat in her file, a permanent record of the day she'd chosen lives over protocol. She'd framed a copy and hung it in her office, not as shame, but as reminder of what mattered, of what she'd been willing to sacrifice, of who she'd become. 6 months after the court-martial, the Marine Corps presented her with the Distinguished Flying Cross in a private ceremony. Staff Sergeant Cole was there, Lieutenant Cross, Corporal Reeves, 47 others who'd been in that convoy. They stood and saluted as the medal was pinned to her uniform, and she'd felt the weight of their gratitude and survival. 1 year later, her training program was adopted across all combat aviation units. Danger-close CAS tactics became standard curriculum. The 200-meter rule was revised to allow commander discretion in extraordinary circumstances. Lena had changed the system not by destroying it, but by showing it could be better. 2 years later, she made captain again, the promotion her conviction had temporarily blocked. By then, nobody mentioned the court-martial. They mentioned Serpent's Jaw. They mentioned the 540 lives. They mentioned the pilot who'd been willing to break rules that needed breaking. Now standing in the desert sun, watching her students prepare for their first real tactical scenarios, Lena understood what her father had understood. That doing right sometimes cost everything, that principles mattered more than comfort, that saving lives was worth risking your own future. But she also understood what her mother had tried to teach her, that surviving to fight another day wasn't cowardice, that you could change the system from inside it, that sometimes the bravest thing you could do was keep going. An A-10 rolled past, its pilot giving her a thumbs up through the canopy. She returned the gesture, watching the aircraft taxi toward the runway. Somewhere, in some future deployment, that pilot would face an impossible choice. And because of what Lena had taught, because of the training she'd developed, because of the example she'd set, that pilot might make a decision that saved lives. That was worth more than any medal, worth more than any headline, worth the price she'd paid. Lena smiled, turned, and walked into the operations building where her students waited, ready to learn how to be the kind of pilots the world needed, skilled, principled, and willing to make the hard calls when it mattered most. Behind her, the desert wind carried the sound of engines and the promise of flight. She was exactly where she belonged. 5 years after Serpent's Jaw, Captain Lena Ward stood in front of 200 graduating combat pilots and told them the truth. Your career will ask you to choose between doing right and doing easy. Choose right, every time. The system will bend or break, but your conscience is permanent. Fly with skill, lead with courage, and never apologize for saving lives. They saluted her as one, and she knew 540 Marines, her father's legacy, and now 200 more pilots carrying forward the lessons she'd learned in a valley-turned battleground. Sometimes the rules need breaking. Sometimes courage looks like defiance. And sometimes saving lives is worth risking everything else.